The first time I saw Marcus Hale's file cross my desk, I figured we'd have him in custody within 48 hours, maximum. That was 3 weeks ago. 23 days, to be exact. And when it finally ended, if you can even call it an ending, when I sat down to write the report with my hands still shaking and my coffee going cold in front of me, I couldn't find the right words to explain what had happened out there in those woods. I still can't, and I've had months to think about it. My name is Deputy US Marshal David Corman, and I've been with the service for 11 years. 11 years of tracking people who don't want to be found, of standing on the wrong side of locked doors at 3 in the morning, of learning that human beings are capable of both incredible stupidity and terrifying intelligence when their freedom is on the line. I've tracked armed robbers through the Everglades in August heat that made your brain feel like it was melting. I've cornered meth dealers in abandoned grain silos where one spark could have turned us all into pink mist. I've pulled fugitives out of attics where they'd been hiding for months, living in their own filth, eating rats, doing whatever it took to stay free for just one more day. I've seen people do desperate things when they're running. I've seen them hurt people they love. I've seen them abandon children, steal from churches, shoot at cops who were just doing their jobs. I've seen them make mistakes that cost them everything, their families, their futures, their lives. But I've never seen anything like Marcus Hale. Not before that case. Not since. And if I'm being honest, I hope I never see anything like it again. The warrant came through on a Tuesday morning in late September. Federal firearms violations, assault on a federal officer, and flight to avoid prosecution. Hale had been a person of interest in a string of armed robberies across the Midwest. Small-town banks mostly, places with minimal security and even less backup. The FBI had been building a case for months, but when agents showed up at his trailer outside of Asheville, North Carolina, things went sideways fast. According to the report, Hale had been expecting them. He'd barricaded the front door, fired 3 rounds through the window, and then disappeared into the woods before the tactical team could get into position. No vehicle, no supplies, just gone. That was 2 weeks before the file landed on my desk. The case was assigned to us because Hale crossed state lines. Witnesses reported seeing him in Tennessee, then Kentucky, then North Carolina again. He was constantly on the move and fled whenever local law enforcement approached him. This wasn't luck. It was something else. I teamed up with Deputy Sheriff Lisa Garrett to pursue the man. She had been in this role longer than me, 15 years, and was known for her meticulousness. She was patient. She was the kind of officer who could sit in a car for 12 hours without complaint, watching a door that would never open. We had worked together before, tracking a bail jumper in rural Virginia, and I trusted her instincts. "What's your read on this guy?" she asked me on the drive down to North Carolina. We were heading to Asheville to meet with the local sheriff's department and go over what they had. I flipped through the file again. Marcus Hale, 42 years old. No family, no fixed address for the past 3 years. A string of manual labor jobs, mostly construction, all of them ending abruptly. No social media presence, no phone records. It was like he'd been practicing for this his whole life. "He's careful," I said. "Paranoid, maybe. Knows how to move without leaving a trail." "Think he's got help?" No. I'd thought about that. Every sighting's been solo. He's not reaching out to anyone. He's just running. For 2 weeks straight? I didn't answer. That was the part that didn't make sense. Running for 2 weeks meant sleeping rough, finding food, staying ahead of every agency in 3 states. It meant constant movement, constant vigilance. Most fugitives burn out after a few days. They get tired, they make mistakes, they reach out to someone they shouldn't. But Hale wasn't doing any of that. The Asheville Sheriff's Office was a squat brick building on the edge of town, surrounded by mountains that looked like they went on forever. Sheriff Tom Milliken met us in the lobby, a heavy-set man in his late 50s with the kind of face that had seen too many bad situations. "You're the Marshals?" he asked, shaking our hands. His grip was firm but brief. "Come on back. We've got everything set up." He led us to a conference room where a map of the area was spread across the table, marked with red circles and lines. "These are all the confirmed sightings," Milliken said, pointing to the clusters. "Started here, at his trailer. Then we got reports of him heading east into the Pisgah National Forest. That's about 500,000 acres of wilderness, most of it uninhabited." "Any pattern to the sightings?" Garrett asked. "That's the thing," Milliken said, leaning against the table. "There's no pattern. He shows up in one place, then 12 hours later he's spotted 30 miles away on foot. No vehicle, no bike, nothing. Just walking. 30 miles in 12 hours? I said. "That's not possible, not in that terrain." "I know." Milliken's expression didn't change. "But that's what we're seeing. And it's not just the distance, it's the timing. We've had 3 separate reports of him being in 2 different places at the same time." Garrett and I exchanged a glance. "Mistaken identity," she said. "Maybe." Milliken didn't sound convinced. But all 3 witnesses gave the same description. Same height, same build, same torn jacket. And one of them was my deputy, a guy who's been on the force for 20 years. He's not the type to make mistakes. I studied the map. The sightings formed a rough circle around the national forest, like Hale was staying close to the wilderness but occasionally drifting into town for supplies. "What about trail cameras?" I asked. "Hunters use them out there. Anything turn up?" "That's the weird part," Milliken said. He pulled out a folder and spread a series of photographs across the table. "We pulled footage from every camera we could find. Look at these timestamps." The photos were grainy, black and white, the kind of low-quality images you'd expect from cheap motion-activated cameras. But they all showed the same figure, a man in a dark jacket walking through the woods. In some shots he was barely visible, just a blur at the edge of the frame. In others, he was staring directly at the camera. I picked up one of the photos. The timestamp read 3:47 a.m. The next photo, from a different camera 5 miles away, read 4:02 a.m. 15 minutes, Garrett said quietly. 5 miles in 15 minutes. On foot, Milliken added. In the middle of the night, through dense forest. I set the photo down. He could be running. Maybe. Milliken's tone suggested he didn't believe it. But here's the thing. We sent a team out to check the route between those cameras. It's rough terrain. Steep inclines, thick underbrush, a creek that's swollen from the rain. Even at a dead sprint, it would take at least 40 minutes. And that's in daylight, with someone who knows the area. "What are you saying?" Garrett asked. Milliken looked at us both, his expression grim. "I'm saying this guy doesn't sleep. Or, if he does, we haven't caught him doing it. Every sighting, every photo, it's always at night, always moving. We've had officers staking out the trails, watching for him to bed down somewhere, but he never does. He just keeps walking." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "How long has he been doing this?" 2 weeks, Milliken said, "since he ran from the FBI. And in that time, we haven't found a single campsite, no fire pits, no shelters, nothing. It's like he doesn't need to rest." Garrett was quiet for a moment, staring at the map. "People don't work that way," she said finally. "The human body needs sleep. After 72 hours without it, you start hallucinating. After a week, you can't function. After 2 weeks," she trailed off. After 2 weeks, you should be dead, Milliken finished. I know. But Marcus Hale isn't dead. He's out there, right now, and he's still moving. We spent the rest of the afternoon going over every detail. Witness statements, surveillance footage, reports from the tracking dogs that had lost his scent at a creek and never picked it up again. The more I read, the less sense it made. One witness, a hiker, said she'd seen Hale standing on a ridge at dawn, perfectly still, staring at the sunrise. She'd called it in, but by the time officers arrived, he was gone. Another witness, a gas station attendant, said Hale had come in at 2 a.m. to buy bottled water and beef jerky. He'd paid in cash, hadn't said a word, and left. The attendant described his eyes as empty, like he was looking through her instead of at her. Did she say anything else? I asked Milliken. He hesitated. She said he didn't blink. Not once. She noticed because it creeped her out. Maybe she was tired, Garrett said. Late shift, you see things. Maybe. Milliken didn't look convinced. That night, Garrett and I checked into a motel on the edge of town. It was the kind of place where the air conditioner rattled and the TV only got 3 channels. But it was close to the forest, and that's what mattered. We'd start our search at first light, working our way through the areas where Hale had been sighted most recently. I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the photos, about the timestamps, about the witness who said Hale's eyes were empty. I kept telling myself there had to be a rational explanation. Mistaken identity, faulty cameras, exaggerated reports. But the more I turned it over in my mind, the less any of that made sense. At some point, I must have dozed off because I woke to the sound of my phone buzzing. It was 4:23 a.m. Garrett's name was on the screen. Yeah? I answered, my voice thick with sleep. Turn on the news, she said. Local station, Channel 7. I fumbled for the remote and flipped through the channels until I found it. The screen showed a reporter standing in front of a small convenience store, the kind of place that stayed open all night for truckers and insomniacs. The banner at the bottom of the screen read, "Fugitive sighting in Bakersville. Spotted just after midnight," the reporter was saying. Witnesses say the man matching the description of Marcus Hale entered the store, purchased several items, and left on foot. Authorities are asking anyone with information to call the tip line. Bakersville. I grabbed the map from the table and found it. It was 40 miles north of Asheville, in the opposite direction from where we'd expected Hale to go. He's moving again, Garrett said on the phone. We need to get out there. Now? Now! I was dressed and in the car within 10 minutes. Garrett was waiting in the parking lot, her expression tense. We didn't talk much on the drive. The roads were empty at that hour, just the two of us and the occasional semi-truck hauling freight through the mountains. Bakersville was a nothing town, population maybe 500, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone and strangers stood out. The convenience store was on the main drag, a fluorescent-lit box surrounded by darkness. 2 sheriff's deputies were already there, interviewing the clerk. "Marshals?" one of them asked as we walked in. He was young, mid-20s, with the kind of nervous energy that came from being new on the job. "You hear about the sighting?" "Yeah," I said. "What did the clerk say?" "She's pretty shaken up," the deputy said. "Says the guy came in, didn't say a word, just grabbed what he needed and left. Paid in cash, exact change. She said he smelled like the woods, like dirt and sweat." "Did she get a good look at him?" Garrett asked. "Yeah." The deputy glanced toward the clerk, a middle-aged woman sitting on a stool behind the counter. "She said it was definitely him. Same description as the bulletin, but there's something else." "What?" "She said he was soaking wet, like he'd just walked through a river." I felt that cold sensation again, settling into my chest. Was it raining tonight? No, the deputy said. Hasn't rained in 2 days. Garrett and I exchanged a look. Can we talk to her? I asked. The clerk's name was Denise. She was in her late 40s with tired eyes and hands that wouldn't stop shaking. She told us the same story the deputy had relayed, but with more detail. Hale had walked in at 12:14 a.m. She remembered the exact time because she'd been watching the clock, waiting for her shift to end. He'd gone straight to the back of the store, grabbed 3 bottles of water and a pack of trail mix, and brought them to the counter without looking at her. He didn't say anything? I asked. Not a word, Denise said. I tried to make small talk, ask him how his night was going, but he didn't respond, just stared at the counter. And you said he was wet? Soaked, she said. His jacket, his pants, everything. Water was dripping off him, pooling on the floor. I thought maybe he'd been in an accident or something, but he didn't seem hurt. He just seemed tired, like he'd been walking forever. Did he say where he was going? No. Denise wrapped her arms around herself. But when he left, I watched him through the window. He didn't go to a car or anything. He just started walking north toward the mountains. And here's the thing. She paused, like she wasn't sure she should say it. Go on, Garrett said gently. He didn't walk like a normal person. It was more like he was being pulled, like something was dragging him forward. I know that sounds crazy, but that's what it looked like. I thanked her and stepped outside with Garrett. The night was cold, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones and doesn't let go. What do you think? I asked. I think she's telling the truth, Garrett said. But I don't know what that means. He's heading north, I said, looking toward the mountains, deeper into the wilderness, or away from something. I turned to look at her. What do you mean? I don't know, she said quietly. But people run toward things or away from things, and I don't think Marcus Hale is running toward anything. We spent the rest of the night following his trail. The deputies lent us a thermal scope, and we hiked into the foothills, scanning for any sign of heat signature. The forest was dense, the kind of darkness that swallows sound and light and makes you feel like you're walking through a void. At one point, Garrett stopped. "Do you hear that?" she asked. I listened. At first, there was nothing. Then, faintly, I heard it. Footsteps, steady, rhythmic, moving through the underbrush somewhere ahead of us. We followed the sound for 20 minutes, but we never got closer. It was always just ahead, just out of reach, like we were chasing a ghost. When the sun finally came up, we were miles from the road, standing on a rocky outcrop overlooking a valley. The forest stretched out below us, endless and silent. Somewhere down there, Marcus Hale was still moving. "He's not going to stop," Garrett said. "Is he?" I didn't answer, because I was starting to think she was right. We didn't find Marcus Hale that first day, or the second, or the third. What we did find were traces. Boot prints in the mud, always heading north. A torn piece of fabric caught on a branch, the same dark jacket every witness had described. A discarded water bottle, still cold to the touch like it had been set down minutes before we arrived. Each piece of evidence told us we were close, but close wasn't enough. By the end of the first week, we'd covered over 100 miles of terrain. Garrett and I worked 12-hour shifts, sometimes longer, coordinating with local search and rescue teams, tracking dogs, even a helicopter from the state police. But Hale stayed ahead of us, always. "It's like he knows where we're going to be," Garrett said one night. We were sitting in the car at the edge of a logging road eating cold sandwiches and going over the map for the 100th time. Every time we set up a perimeter, he slips through. Every time we think we've got him cornered, he's already gone. He's got experience, I said. Military, maybe. Or he's spent enough time in the wilderness to know how to move without being seen. It's more than that, Garrett said. She pointed to the map. Look at this. We've got sightings here, here, and here, all within a 6-hour window. That's 15 miles between the first and last sighting, on foot, in the dark. People can cover that distance, I said, though I wasn't sure I believed it. Not without rest, Garrett said. Not for a week straight. David, he's not sleeping. We've got thermal imaging, trail cameras, officers posted at every shelter and campsite within 50 miles. And we haven't caught him resting once. I stared at the map. She was right. Every sighting, every piece of evidence, pointed to the same impossible conclusion. Marcus Hale hadn't stopped moving since the day he ran. The locals started talking. It started with the search and rescue volunteers, the people who knew the mountains better than anyone. They'd come back from the field with stories that didn't quite add up. Footprints that ended in the middle of a clearing, with no sign of where they continued. Strange sounds in the night, like someone walking in circles just beyond the edge of the campfire light. One volunteer, a man named Carl, who'd been hiking these mountains for 30 years, told me he'd seen Hale standing on a ridge at dusk. I yelled at him to stop, Carl said, but he didn't move. He just stood there, staring at me, and then he turned and walked into the trees. I followed him, but when I got to the ridge there was nothing. No tracks, no sound, nothing. It was like he'd vanished. Maybe he circled back, I suggested. Carl shook his head. I know these woods, Marshal. I know every trail, every shortcut. There's no way he could have doubled back without me seeing him. It's like he just stepped out of existence. I didn't know what to say to that. The sightings kept coming. A gas station attendant in a town called Marshall reported seeing Hale at 3 a.m., buying more water and trail mix. A farmer near Hot Springs said he'd seen someone matching Hale's description walking along the highway at dawn, soaked to the skin despite the clear weather. A truck driver said he'd nearly hit Hale on a back road, that the man had stepped into the road without warning and then disappeared into the ditch before he could brake. Did you stop? I asked the trucker. Hell no, he said. I wasn't about to get out of my truck in the middle of the night for some lunatic, but I saw him in the rear view. He was just standing there watching me drive away. What was he doing? Nothing, just standing, didn't move, didn't blink. It was like he wasn't real. Garrett and I decided to split up. She'd take the northern routes, focusing on the areas where Hale had been sighted most recently. I'd work the southern trails, covering the places he might circle back to. It wasn't ideal, but we were running out of options. I spent 2 days hiking alone, following every lead, checking every abandoned cabin and hunting blind. The forest was starting to feel different, oppressive, like the trees were watching me. I told myself it was just exhaustion, that I'd been out here too long but the feeling wouldn't go away. On the 3rd day, I found something. It was a campsite, or what was left of one. A ring of stones arranged in a circle, the ashes inside still warm. I knelt down and touched them, feeling the faint heat against my fingers. Someone had been here recently, within the last few hours. I radioed Garrett. I've got something, looks like a fire pit, still warm. Where are you? She asked. I gave her my coordinates. About 2 miles east of the Appalachian Trail junction. I'm going to keep looking. Be careful, she said. If it's him, he knows you're there. I stood up and scanned the area. The campsite was in a small clearing surrounded by dense trees. There were no footprints, no sign of which direction the person had gone. Just the fire pit and a few flattened patches of grass where someone might have sat. And then I saw it. Carved into a tree at the edge of the clearing was a single word: awake. The letters were rough, jagged, like they'd been scratched into the bark with a knife. I stared at it for a long moment, trying to make sense of it. Was it a message, a warning, or just the random graffiti of someone passing through? I took a photo and sent it to Garrett. Her response came back almost immediately. "What the hell is that?" "I don't know," I typed back, "but it's fresh." I spent the next hour searching the area, but I didn't find anything else. No footprints, no discarded items, nothing. Just that one word, carved into the tree like a taunt. That night, I drove back to the motel and found Garrett waiting for me in the parking lot. She looked as tired as I felt, her eyes bloodshot, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. "Any luck?" she asked. "Maybe," I said, showing her the photo of the carving. "What do you think it means?" She stared at it for a long time. "I think he's trying to tell us something, or warn us. About what?" I didn't have an answer. We went inside and spread the map across the bed, marking every sighting, every piece of evidence, every strange report. The pattern was becoming clearer. Hale wasn't just running, he was circling. Moving in a rough loop around the national forest, never straying too far from the center, but never staying in one place long enough to be caught. "He's tethered," Garrett said. "To something, like he can't leave." "Or won't," I said. "What's the difference?" I didn't know. The next morning, we got a call from Sheriff Milliken. Another sighting, this time at a rest stop on the highway. A trucker had reported seeing Hale in the parking lot, standing by the dumpsters, just staring at the road. "We sent a unit out there," Milliken said. But by the time they arrived, he was gone. The trucker said he looked wrong, like he was sick or something. Said his skin was gray, and he was swaying on his feet. "How long ago was this?" I asked. 20 minutes. Garrett and I were in the car within 5 minutes. The rest stop was 15 miles away, and we made it in 10, lights flashing, siren wailing. But when we got there, Hale was already gone. The trucker was still there, though, leaning against his rig, smoking a cigarette. His hands were shaking. "You saw him?" I asked. "Yeah," he said. "I saw him, or whatever the hell that was." "What do you mean?" The trucker took a long drag and exhaled slowly. "I've been driving these roads for 20 years, Marshal. I've seen all kinds of things. Drunks, junkies, people at the end of their rope. But that guy, that wasn't normal. Can you describe him? Tall, maybe 6 foot, dark jacket, ripped jeans. But it was his face, man. It was like he wasn't all there. His eyes were wide open, but he wasn't seeing anything. And his skin, it was this weird gray color, like he'd been dead for days. I thought maybe he was a corpse or something, but then he moved." "What did he do?" "He turned and looked right at me. And I swear to God, Marshal, it felt like he was looking through me, like I wasn't even there, and then he just walked off into the trees. Didn't run, didn't stumble, just walked. Like he had somewhere to be." I thanked the trucker and walked over to the tree line. Garrett was already there, crouched down, examining the ground. "Got tracks," she said. "Fresh, heading northwest." We followed them for half a mile before they disappeared at a creek. The dogs lost the scent again, just like before. It was like Hale had vanished into thin air. "How is he doing this?" Garrett asked, frustration creeping into her voice. "I don't know," I said, "but we're going to find out." That night, I couldn't sleep again. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the trucker's description. Gray skin, empty eyes, like he'd been dead for days. People don't look like that when they're alive, not unless they're very, very sick. I pulled out my phone and started researching. Sleep deprivation, extreme fatigue, dehydration. The symptoms matched what the trucker had described. After 2 weeks without sleep, the human body starts to shut down. The skin turns pale, the eyes become unfocused, motor functions deteriorate. Most people can't even stand at that point, let alone walk for miles through the wilderness. But Marcus Hale was still moving. I kept searching, falling down rabbit holes of medical studies and case reports. Fatal familial insomnia, extreme stress responses, adrenaline overdoses. None of it fit. Nothing explained how someone could go 2 weeks without sleep and still function, unless he wasn't functioning, unless he was just moving. I closed my phone and stared at the dark ceiling. Somewhere out there, Marcus Hale was walking through the night, his body failing, his mind unraveling. And for reasons I couldn't explain, he wouldn't stop. The next day, we got 3 more sightings, all of them within a 10-mile radius, all of them in the middle of the night, and all of them described the same thing: a man who looked like he was dying, walking north, always north, like he was being pulled by an invisible thread. "We need to cut him off," Garrett said. "Figure out where he's going and get there first." I looked at the map. The sightings formed a pattern, a line pointing toward the deepest part of the national forest, a place called Devil's Creek. It was remote, almost inaccessible, the kind of place where hikers went missing and were never found. "That's where he's going," I said. "Then that's where we need to be." We left at dawn, driving as far as the roads would take us, then hiking the rest of the way. The terrain was brutal, steep climbs and thick underbrush, but we pushed through. By midday, we'd reached Devil's Creek. It was a narrow gorge, carved out by a fast-moving stream, surrounded by cliffs on both sides. The only way in or out was a single trail that wound through the rocks. If Hale was heading here, we'd see him coming. We set up a position on a ridge overlooking the gorge and waited. Hours passed. The sun dipped below the horizon, and the forest grew dark. Garrett and I took turns watching through the thermal scope, scanning for any sign of movement. But there was nothing. Just the creek, rushing over the rocks, and the wind moving through the trees. And then, at 11:47 p.m., I saw him. A heat signature moving along the trail at the bottom of the gorge. Slow, steady, heading straight toward us. "I've got him," I whispered into the radio. "Where?" Garrett asked. 600 yards moving north, he's alone. Let's move." We descended into the gorge using the rocks for cover, keeping our distance. The figure was closer now, maybe 200 yards away. I could see him through the scope, a man in a dark jacket, walking with a strange, uneven gait. His head was down, his arms hanging loose at his sides. "Marcus Hale!" I shouted. "US Marshals, stop where you are!" He didn't stop. He didn't even slow down. He just kept walking, like he hadn't heard me. "Hale!" I shouted again. "This is your last warning. Stop now, or we will use force." Still nothing. Garrett and I moved closer, weapons drawn, closing the distance. 50 yards, 30, 20, and then he stopped. He stood there perfectly still, his back to us. For a moment, I thought he was going to turn around to face us, to finally end this, but he didn't. He just stood there, swaying slightly like he was standing on the deck of a ship. "Hale," I said, my voice steady but firm. "Turn around, slowly. Keep your hands where I can see them." He didn't move. "Hale, do it now." And then, slowly, he started to turn. But there was something wrong with the way he moved. It wasn't smooth. It was jerky, mechanical, like his joints weren't working right, like he was a puppet being pulled by strings. When he finally faced us, I saw his face. The trucker had been right. His skin was gray, almost translucent, stretched tight over his skull. His eyes were open, but they didn't focus on us. They stared past us, at something we couldn't see. His mouth hung open and his breath came in short, rasping gasps. "Jesus," Garrett whispered. "Hale," I said again, trying to keep my voice calm. "It's over. You need to come with us. We'll get you help." His mouth moved, like he was trying to speak, but no sound came out. And then, slowly, he raised one hand and pointed behind us. I turned instinctively and saw nothing, just the dark forest and the rushing creek. When I looked back, Hale was walking again. Not toward us. Not away. Just walking deeper into the gorge toward the cliffs. "Stop!" I shouted, running after him. "Hale, stop!" But he didn't stop. He reached the edge of the cliff, where the creek dropped into a waterfall, and without hesitation he stepped off. I lunged forward, grabbing for him, but I was too late. He fell, disappearing into the darkness below, swallowed by the sound of the rushing water. Garrett and I scrambled down the rocks, using our flashlights to search the pool at the base of the waterfall. The water was dark, churning, impossible to see through. We called for backup, for divers, for anyone who could help, but deep down I knew it was over. Marcus Hale was gone. The dive team arrived at dawn. They brought lights, ropes, and equipment designed to search fast-moving water in treacherous conditions. Garrett and I watched from the bank as they suited up, their faces grim and focused. This wasn't the first body recovery they'd done in Devil's Creek, and it wouldn't be the last. The gorge had a reputation. People fell. People drowned. The creek didn't give them back easily. "You sure he went in here?" the lead diver asked me. His name was Rodriguez, a compact man in his 40s with the kind of weathered face that came from spending too much time in cold water. "Positive," I said. "I saw him step off the cliff. Right there." I pointed to the spot where Hale had disappeared, maybe 30 feet above the waterfall. Rodriguez looked up, calculating the angle, the depth, the current. If he went in there, the water would have taken him downstream. Maybe a quarter mile, maybe more. Depends on how deep he sank. How long will it take? Could be hours, he said. Could be days. The bottom's full of rocks and debris. If he got caught on something, we might not find him at all. Garrett and I exchanged a look. "We need to find him," she said. "We'll do our best," Rodriguez said, pulling on his mask. "But no promises." The search began. The divers worked in pairs, descending into the pool, their lights cutting through the murky water like knives. Garrett and I waited on the bank, watching the surface, waiting for them to surface. Minutes stretched into hours. The sun climbed higher, burning off the morning mist, but the air stayed cold. I kept replaying the moment in my mind. The way Hale had looked at us, the way he'd pointed behind us, the way he'd walked off the cliff like it was the most natural thing in the world. "He didn't even try to catch himself," Garrett said quietly. She was sitting on a rock, her arms wrapped around her knees. "He just stepped off." "I know. Why would he do that? I don't know." But I had theories, none of them good. At 10:30 a.m., one of the divers surfaced, pulling off his mask and waving to Rodriguez. "We've got something," he called. Garrett and I moved closer to the edge as the divers hauled something out of the water. It was a body, gray, bloated, tangled in weeds. They laid it on the rocks, and Rodriguez knelt down, checking for signs of life even though we all knew there wouldn't be any. "Is it him?" I asked. Rodriguez turned the body over, and I got a look at the face. It was Hale, or what was left of him. His skin was pale, almost white, his eyes open and clouded. There were cuts on his face and hands, probably from the rocks, but otherwise he looked almost peaceful, like he'd finally stopped running. "Yeah," I said, "that's him." The coroner arrived an hour later, a thin woman in her 50s named her Paulson, who'd seen more dead bodies in this county than anyone else. She knelt down next to Hale, examining him with the kind of detached professionalism that came from years of practice. "Time of death?" I asked. "Hard to say," she said, not looking up. "The cold water slows decomposition, but based on the condition of the body, I'd guess within the last 12 hours. "That matches," Garrett said. "We saw him go in around midnight." Dr. Paulson frowned. "You saw him go in?" "Yeah," I said. "Why?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she continued her examination, checking his eyes, his mouth, his hands. Finally, she sat back and looked at us. "How long was he in the water?" 8 hours, give or take," I said. "And you're sure it was him? You saw him fall?" "Positive." Dr. Paulson's frown deepened. "Then I don't understand." "Understand what?" She pointed to Hale's hands. "Look at his fingers. The skin's wrinkled, but not excessively, and his eyes. There's no significant cloudiness, no sign of prolonged water exposure. If he'd been in the water for 8 hours, especially in cold, fast-moving water like this, I'd expect more damage. More swelling, but this," she trailed off, shaking her head. "What are you saying?" Garrett asked. "I'm saying it looks like he's only been in the water for an hour. Maybe less." "That's not possible," I said. "We were here the whole time. We watched the search. He didn't surface." "I'm not saying he did," Sir Paulson said. "I'm just telling you what the body is showing me. And it doesn't match your timeline." She called for the body to be transported to the morgue, and Garrett and I stood there watching as they loaded Hale onto a stretcher and carried him up the trail. Neither of us spoke. We didn't need to. We were both thinking the same thing. Something wasn't right. Back at the sheriff's office, we debriefed with Milliken. He listened to our account without interrupting, his expression unreadable. When we finished, he leaned back in his chair and rubbed his face with both hands. "So, let me get this straight," he said. "You chased him for 2 weeks. He never slept, never stopped moving, and when you finally cornered him, he walked off a cliff." "That's the short version," I said. "And the coroner thinks he wasn't in the water as long as he should have been." "Yeah." Milliken was quiet for a long moment. "You think there's a mistake?" "Maybe the body got caught on something, kept it from drifting." "Maybe," Garrett said. "But that doesn't explain the rest of it." "What rest?" "The sightings," I said. "The distances he covered. The fact that he didn't sleep for 2 weeks. None of it makes sense, Sheriff." Milliken looked at me, his eyes hard. "What are you saying, Marshal? That this was something other than a fugitive running from the law?" "I'm saying I don't know what it was." He stood up and walked to the window, staring out at the mountains. "People do strange things when they're desperate," he said finally. "They push themselves past what they thought was possible. They survive things they shouldn't. Maybe Hale was just tougher than most. Maybe," I said, though I didn't believe it. Milliken turned back to us. "Look, I know this case has been hard on both of you. You've been out there for weeks, barely sleeping, barely eating. Maybe you're seeing things that aren't there. We're not making this up," Garrett said, her voice sharp. "I'm not saying you are," Milliken said. "But sometimes, when you're exhausted, your brain fills in the gaps, makes connections that aren't really there. I've seen it happen before." "We know what we saw," I said. Milliken sighed. "Then put it in your report, but do me a favor, keep it factual. Stick to what you can prove. The rest?" He trailed off, shaking his head. The rest is just going to raise questions nobody wants to answer. The autopsy was scheduled for the next morning. Garrett and I went back to the motel, but neither of us could sleep. I kept thinking about Hale's face, the way his skin had looked, the way his eyes had stared past us. I kept thinking about the word carved into the tree, awake. At 2 a.m., my phone rang. It was Dr. Paulson. "Marshal Corman," she said. Her voice sounded strained. "Yeah," I said, sitting up in bed. "What's wrong?" "I need you to come to the morgue, now." "Why? What happened?" "Just come. Please." I woke Garrett, and we drove to the hospital in silence. The morgue was in the basement, a sterile white room that smelled like disinfectant and death. Dr. Paulson was waiting for us, still in her scrubs, her face pale. "What's going on?" I asked. She didn't answer. Instead, she led us to the examination table where Hale's body was laid out, covered by a sheet. She pulled it back, and I saw his face again. But something was different. His eyes were closed. "I don't understand," Garrett said. "We saw him at the creek. His eyes were open." "They were," Dr. Paulson said. "When I examined the body this afternoon, his eyes were open. Clouded, like I told you. But when I came back tonight to start the autopsy, they were closed." "Maybe someone closed them," I said. "One of your assistants." "No one else has been in here," Dr. Paulson said. "I checked the logs. I was the last person to see the body, and I didn't close his eyes." "Then how—" "There's more," she interrupted. She pulled the sheet down further, revealing Hale's chest. "I started the external examination. Look at this." She pointed to a series of marks on his torso. They were faint, almost invisible, but under the light I could see them. Lines, dozens of them, crisscrossing his skin in a strange pattern. "What are those?" Garrett asked. "I don't know," Dr. Paulson said. "They weren't there this afternoon. I would have noticed." "You're saying they appeared after he died?" "I'm saying they weren't there before, and now they are. And I don't have an explanation for it." I stared at the marks. They looked deliberate, almost like some kind of script or symbol, but I couldn't make sense of them. "Have you taken photos?" "Yes," Dr. Paulson said. "But there's something else. When I measured the body for the autopsy report, I noticed something odd, his height." "What about it?" "According to his arrest records, Marcus Hale was 6'2", but the body on this table is 6'4". "That's not possible," Garrett said. "We saw him. It's the same man." "I know," Dr. Paulson said, "but the measurements don't lie. Either your records are wrong, or something happened to the body." "Bodies don't grow after death," I said. "No," Dr. Paulson agreed. "They don't." We stood there in silence, staring at the body. Finally, Garrett spoke. "What do you want us to do?" "I don't know," Dr. Paulson said. "But I needed you to see this because whatever's going on, it's not normal, and I don't think it's over." She covered the body again, and we left. Outside, the air was cold and still. Garrett leaned against the car, her arms crossed, staring at the sky. "What the hell is happening, David?" "I don't know," I said. "We saw him fall. We watched them pull him out of the water. That's him in there. It has to be. I know. But the height, the marks, the eyes, none of it makes sense." I didn't have an answer. We stood there for a long time, neither of us speaking, both of us trying to make sense of something that had no sense to be made. Finally, Garrett said, "We need to see the trail cameras." "What?" "The cameras," she said. "The ones that caught him walking through the forest. We need to go back and check them, all of them." "Why?" "Because I need to know," she said. I need to know if we were chasing the same man the whole time. We drove out to the forest at dawn. The trail cameras were still there, mounted on trees at various points along the routes Hale had taken. We pulled the SD cards from each one and loaded them onto a laptop in the car. There were hundreds of images, most of them showing nothing but empty forest, deer, the occasional hiker. But then we found them. The photos of Hale. We went through them one by one, comparing the timestamps, the locations, the angles. And slowly, a pattern emerged. In the first few photos taken in the days after Hale had fled, he looked normal. Tired, maybe, but human. His face was recognizable, his posture upright. But as the days went on, something changed. In the later photos, his face started to blur, like the camera couldn't quite focus on him. His movements became jerky, unnatural. And in the final photo, taken the night before we cornered him at Devil's Creek, he didn't look human at all. He looked like a shadow. Garrett zoomed in on the image. "What the hell is that?" "I don't know," I said. But I felt that cold sensation again, settling into my chest. We spent the rest of the day going through the evidence, trying to find some rational explanation. But there wasn't one. Everything pointed to the same impossible conclusion. The man we'd been chasing wasn't Marcus Hale, or he was, but he'd become something else. That night, I called Dr. Paulson. "Have you finished the autopsy?" "No," she said. "I've been trying, but something keeps happening." "What do you mean?" "Every time I try to start, the equipment malfunctions. The lights flicker, the instruments stop working, and the body..." She paused. "The body keeps moving." "Moving?" "Small things, a finger twitching, his head turning slightly. I know it's just post-mortem spasms, but it doesn't feel right. Do you want us to come back?" "No," she said quickly. "I just wanted you to know. I'll finish the report tomorrow, but I'm not going to be alone with the body anymore." She hung up, and I sat there, staring at my phone. Garrett was watching me. "What did she say?" "She said the body keeps moving." Jesus Christ. I looked out the window at the dark forest. Somewhere out there, Marcus Hale had been running from something or toward something for 2 weeks straight, and now he was dead. But the feeling I had, the cold, creeping sensation in my chest, told me that whatever had been out there wasn't gone. It was still here. I never finished writing the report. I tried, God knows I tried. I sat at my desk for hours, staring at the blank screen, trying to put it all into words. The chase, the sightings, the way Hale had looked at us before he stepped off the cliff. But every time I started typing, my hands would stop, because the moment I put it down in writing, it would become real. And some part of me didn't want it to be real. The official report went to Milliken instead. He filed it under fugitive apprehended, deceased, and closed the case. As far as the federal government was concerned, Marcus Hale was dead. The manhunt was over, and that was the end of it. But it wasn't. Dr. Paulson completed the autopsy 3 days after we found the body. Her report listed the cause of death as drowning, with contributing factors of exhaustion and exposure. She noted the unusual markings on the torso but attributed them to post-mortem changes caused by the water. She didn't mention the height discrepancy. She didn't mention the eyes. And when I called her to ask why, she said, "Because no one would believe it, and I need to keep my job." I understood. I didn't blame her. Garrett and I were reassigned to different cases almost immediately. The service wanted us back in rotation, back to normal work, tracking bail jumpers and serving warrants like we'd always done. But normal felt like a lie now. Every case felt small, trivial, because none of them were like Hale. We stayed in touch, Garrett and I. We'd call each other late at night when the cases were quiet and the offices were empty, and we'd talk about what we'd seen. We never said it out loud, but we both knew. We'd chased something we didn't understand. And it had gotten away. 2 months after Hale's death, I got a call from a ranger in the Pisgah National Forest. He said hikers had been reporting strange sightings in the Devil's Creek area. A man in a dark jacket, walking alone at night, always heading north. The descriptions matched Hale's. "You want me to check it out?" the ranger asked. "No," I said. "Leave it alone." "You sure?" "Positive." He hung up, and I never heard about it again. But I started seeing the reports. They came in sporadically every few weeks from different parts of the forest. A man walking at night. Gray skin, empty eyes, always moving north. Some reports were from hikers, some were from locals. One was from a state trooper who'd tried to pull the man over for walking on the highway. The trooper said the man had looked at him, turned, and walked into the trees. When the trooper followed, the man was gone. I didn't follow up on any of them. I didn't want to know. Garrett called me 6 months after the case closed. It was late, past midnight, and I was half asleep when I answered. "David," she said. Her voice was tight, strained. "What's wrong?" "I saw him." I sat up. "What?" "I saw him, Marcus Hale. I was driving through North Carolina, passing through the mountains, and I saw him. He was standing on the side of the road, just standing there, staring at the cars. Garrett, Hale's dead. We pulled his body out of the creek." "I know what we did," she said. "But I saw him. It was him, David. Same jacket, same build, same face. He looked right at me when I drove past. And I swear to God, he smiled. Maybe it was someone who looked like him. No." Her voice was firm. "It was him." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to tell her she was wrong, that she was seeing things, that the case had gotten into her head and wouldn't let go. But another part of me, the part that had been there in the gorge, that had seen Hale step off the cliff, believed her. "What do you want to do?" I asked finally. "I don't know," she said. "But I needed to tell someone. I needed to know I wasn't crazy." "You're not crazy. Then what's happening?" "I don't know." She hung up, and I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, thinking about Marcus Hale. About the way he'd walked through the forest for 2 weeks without stopping. About the way he'd pointed behind us before he fell. About the word carved into the tree, awake. I fell asleep eventually, but I dreamed about him. In the dream, I was back in the gorge, standing at the edge of the cliff, watching Hale fall. But when he hit the water, he didn't sink. He floated. And then he stood up, water streaming off his body, and he started walking again. North. Always north. I woke up in a cold sweat. The next morning, I called Milliken. "Sheriff," I said, "I need to ask you something." "Go ahead, Marshal." "The sightings in the forest, the man in the dark jacket, have they stopped?" There was a long pause. "No," he said finally. "They haven't. How many reports have you gotten?" 12 in the last month, maybe more. I stopped counting." "And you're not investigating?" "What's there to investigate?" Milliken asked. "A man walking in the woods? That's not a crime, Marshal. And even if it was, we'd never find him. You know that. But the descriptions—" "I know what the descriptions say," Milliken interrupted. "But Marcus Hale is dead. We have a body. We have a death certificate. As far as the law is concerned, the case is closed. But let it go, Marshal," he said, his voice firm. "Whatever you think you saw out there, whatever you think is happening, it's not your problem anymore. You did your job. You brought him in. That's all that matters." He hung up before I could respond. I sat there, phone in hand, staring at the wall. He was right, of course. The case was closed. Hale was dead. I'd moved on to other cases, other fugitives, other problems. But the feeling wouldn't go away. The cold, creeping sensation that something was still out there. Still moving, still awake. I pulled up the map of the National Forest on my computer and marked every sighting that had been reported since Hale's death. They formed a pattern. A rough circle centered on Devil's Creek, spreading outward slowly, like ripples in water. He wasn't just walking. He was expanding, covering more ground, like he was searching for something, or someone. I closed the map and leaned back in my chair. There was no way to explain it. No rational explanation for how a dead man could still be walking through the forest. No logical reason for why his body had changed in the morgue. No answer for the marks on his skin, or the discrepancy in his height, or the way his eyes had closed on their own. But I knew what I'd seen. And I knew what Garrett had seen. And I knew that somewhere out there, in the dark corners of the Pisgah National Forest, Marcus Hale was still moving. The last time I went back to North Carolina was a year after the case closed. I didn't tell anyone I was going. I just got in my car and drove, following the roads into the mountains, past the small towns and gas stations and rest stops where Hale had been sighted. I didn't have a plan. I just needed to see it again. To stand in the place where it had ended and try to make sense of what had happened. I parked at the trailhead and hiked into Devil's Creek. It was late afternoon, the sun low in the sky, casting long shadows through the trees. The forest was quiet, too quiet. No birds, no insects, just the sound of my boots on the trail and the distant rush of the creek. When I reached the gorge, I stood at the edge of the cliff and looked down at the water. It was the same as I remembered. Dark, fast-moving, unforgiving. I don't know how long I stood there. Minutes, maybe. Hours. But at some point, I felt it. That cold sensation settling into my chest. The feeling of being watched. I turned slowly, scanning the trees, the rocks, the shadows. And then I saw him. He was standing at the far end of the gorge, maybe 200 yards away, partially obscured by the trees. Dark jacket, torn jeans, gray skin. He wasn't moving. Just standing there watching me. I should have called out. I should have drawn my weapon. I should have done something. But I didn't. I just stood there staring back at him, feeling that cold sensation spread through my body. And then he started walking. Not toward me, not away, just walking. Deeper into the forest, his movements slow and deliberate, like he had all the time in the world. I didn't follow him. I didn't need to, because I knew where he was going. North. Always north. Moving through the darkness, never stopping, never sleeping, never resting, always awake. I turned and walked back to my car. I didn't look back. I didn't want to see if he was still there. I just wanted to leave, to put as much distance between myself and that place as possible. When I got home, I pulled out the file on Marcus Hale and locked it in a drawer. I told myself I'd never open it again, that I'd let it go, move on, forget about the man who'd run for 2 weeks without stopping. But I couldn't forget. Because every time I close my eyes, I see him, standing at the edge of the gorge, staring at me with those empty, gray eyes, pointing behind me at something I couldn't see. And I know, somewhere deep in the back of my mind, that he's still out there, still walking, still searching. And someday, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but someday, he's going to find what he's looking for. I just hope I'm not there when he does. The reports still come in. Every few months, someone sees him. A hiker, a ranger, a trucker passing through. They all described the same thing. A man in a dark jacket, walking alone at night, heading north. Gray skin, empty eyes, never stopping. And every time I hear about it, I feel that cold sensation again. Because I know it's him. I know it's Marcus Hale. Or whatever Marcus Hale became. I've tried to explain it to people, to Garrett, to Milliken, to anyone who'll listen. But nobody wants to hear it. They say I'm reading too much into it. That I'm seeing patterns where there aren't any. That the case got into my head and won't let go. Maybe they're right. But I don't think so. Because last week I got a call from a ranger in Tennessee. He said a man matching Hale's description had been spotted walking along the Appalachian Trail. Gray skin, empty eyes, moving north. The ranger asked if I wanted him to investigate. I told him no, because I know now that you can't catch Marcus Hale. You can't stop him. You can't even slow him down. He's not running from something anymore. He's not running toward something. He's just running. Forever. Through the darkness. Through the cold. Through the forests and the mountains and the places where people don't go. And he's never going to stop. I still have nightmares about that night at Devil's Creek. About the way he looked at us. About the way he stepped off the cliff without hesitation. About the way his body disappeared into the water and then came back wrong. Sometimes in those nightmares, I'm the one standing at the edge of the cliff. And when I look down, I see him at the bottom of the gorge, standing in the water, staring up at me. His eyes are open, but they're empty, and he's smiling. And then he starts to climb. I wake up before he reaches me. But the feeling stays. The cold, creeping sensation that he's out there. Getting closer. One step at a time. I don't sleep much anymore, and when I do, I make sure all the doors are locked, all the windows closed, all the lights off, because I don't want to see him standing outside, staring in, waiting. I don't know what Marcus Hale was running from. I don't know what he became. And I don't know why he's still out there, walking through the darkness. Never stopping, never resting. But I know this. Whatever it was that kept him awake for 2 weeks, whatever it was that changed him, whatever it was that pulled him into those woods and wouldn't let him go, it's still there. And it's still waiting. And someday, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but someday, it's going to find someone else. Someone like Marcus Hale. Someone who can't stop running. Someone who can't sleep. And when it does, we'll get another file on our desk. Another manhunt. Another chase through the darkness. And we'll follow them. Because that's what we do. We follow the fugitives into the places they run. Into the forests and the mountains and the darkness. But this time, I won't be the one going. Because I've seen what's out there. And I know now that some things aren't meant to be caught. Some things are meant to run forever. The file is still in my drawer, locked, untouched. I haven't opened it since the day I got back from Devil's Creek. But I know what's inside. The photos, the reports, the timeline that doesn't make sense, the evidence that points to something we don't have words for. And I know that one day, someone else is going to open that file. They're going to see the same things I saw. They're going to ask the same questions, and they're going to go looking for answers. I hope they don't find them, because some questions aren't meant to be answered. Some mysteries aren't meant to be solved. And some things, once you've seen them, you can't unsee. Marcus Hale is still out there. I know it, Garrett knows it, Dr. Paulson knows it. And somewhere, deep down, Sheriff Milliken knows it too. But we don't talk about it. We don't acknowledge it. We just move on. We file the reports. We close the cases. We tell ourselves it's over. But it's not over. It's never going to be over. Because Marcus Hale is awake. And he's never going to sleep again. The house at 1847 Hickory Lane shouldn't have been difficult to find. It was right there on the county property maps, on Google Street View, on every GPS system we checked. A single-story ranch house with beige vinyl siding and a detached garage, sitting on 3/4 of an acre in rural Kentucky, about 40 minutes outside of Louisville. The kind of house you'd drive past 1,000 times without noticing. But there was one thing missing from every database, every real estate listing, every property record we could find. Interior photographs. Not a single one. And that should have been the first warning sign. My name is Deputy U.S. Marshal Jennifer Reeves, and I've been with the service for 9 years. I've served warrants on crack houses where the floorboards were rotting through, on mansions with panic rooms and hidden vaults, on everything in between. I've walked into places where I knew, absolutely knew, that someone was hiding and waiting for us to make a mistake. I've learned to read a space, to feel when something's wrong, to trust my instincts even when they don't make logical sense. But the house on Hickory Lane broke all my instincts. It broke something deeper than that, and by the time we figured out what was happening, it was already too late to walk away. The fugitive's name was Raymond Caulfield, 47 years old, stocky build, thinning hair, the kind of face that belonged to a middle manager or a high school coach. Someone unremarkable, someone you'd forget 5 minutes after meeting him. But Raymond Caulfield had managed to embezzle over $2 million from the construction company where he'd worked as an accountant, and when the FBI started closing in, he'd vanished. That was 6 months ago. The warrant for his arrest came through on a Wednesday morning in early October. Fraud, wire fraud, money laundering, obstruction of justice. The FBI had traced his movements through a series of prepaid credit cards and burner phones following him from Louisville to Nashville to Memphis and back again. But 3 weeks ago, the trail had gone cold. The last ping from his phone had come from a cell tower near the town of Harrodsburg, Kentucky, population 8,000, the kind of place where strangers stick out and everyone knows everyone else's business. The FBI had passed the case to us because they had bigger fish to fry, and because tracking fugitives is what we do. My partner, Deputy Marshal Thomas Vega, and I drove down to Harrodsburg on a Thursday afternoon, the air crisp and cold, the leaves on the trees burning in shades of orange and red. It should have been beautiful. It should have been routine. Vega had been with the service for 15 years, longer than me, with the kind of steady temperament that made him good at this job. He didn't get rattled easily. He didn't jump to conclusions. He worked methodically, checking every lead, following every thread, until the case was closed and the fugitive was in custody. We'd worked together for 3 years and I trusted him completely. "What do we know about the house?" Vega asked as we drove through the countryside, past farms and churches and gas stations that looked like they hadn't changed since the 1970s. I flipped through the file. Property records show it's been owned by the same family since 1968. The Bishops. Last known resident was Eleanor Bishop, died in 2019. No heirs. The house went into probate, but it's been sitting empty ever since. Empty for 4 years? According to the county, yeah, but here's the interesting part. I pulled out a surveillance photo taken by a local deputy 2 weeks ago. It showed the house from the street, the grass overgrown, the windows dark, but there was a car in the driveway, a silver Honda Accord. That car is registered to a shell company that the FBI traced back to Caulfield. He's been using it to move around. So he's squatting in an abandoned house, Vega said. Smart. No one's checking on it. No neighbors close enough to notice. Exactly. And the closest neighbor is almost a quarter mile away. It's perfect for someone who wants to disappear. We met with the local sheriff, a man named Dale Hutchins, at his office in downtown Harrodsburg. He was in his early 60s with white hair and a gut that spoke of too many years behind a desk. but his eyes were sharp, and when we showed him the surveillance photo, he nodded immediately. "Yeah, I know the place," Hutchins said. "The Bishop House. We've had the occasional call out there over the years. Teenagers breaking in, that kind of thing. But it's been quiet lately." "What can you tell us about the family?" I asked. Hutchins leaned back in his chair, thinking. Eleanor Bishop lived there her whole life. Never married, no kids. Kept to herself mostly. The house was her parents' before that. They bought it in the 60s, raised Eleanor there. When they died, she stayed. Lived there alone for, God, must have been 40 years. "Anyone visit her?" Vega asked. "Not that I recall. Like I said, she kept to herself. When she died, it took 3 days before anyone noticed. The mailman finally called it in when the mail started piling up." "What about the inside of the house?" I asked. "Have you been in there?" Hutchins frowned. "Once, maybe twice. The first time was back in the 90s when Eleanor called about a prowler. Turned out to be nothing, just a raccoon in the crawl space. The second time was after she died, when we did the welfare check." "What was it like inside?" He hesitated, and I saw something flicker across his face. Confusion, maybe, or uncertainty. "Honestly, I don't remember much. It was plain. Old furniture, smelled like dust. Nothing stood out." "Do you have any photos from the welfare check?" Vega asked. "We should," Hutchins said. "Let me pull the file." He left the office and came back 10 minutes later with a thin manila folder. He spread it out on the desk, and I saw the incident report, handwritten notes, a basic property sketch, but no photos. "That's strange," Hutchins muttered, flipping through the pages. "I could have sworn we took photos. We always do on welfare checks." "Maybe they're in a different file," I suggested. "Maybe," but he didn't sound convinced. "I'll have someone look into it. In the meantime, what's your plan?" "We're going to set up surveillance," Vega said. "Watch the house. See if Caulfield's still there. If he is, we'll move in and take him into custody." "You want backup?" "Not yet," I said. "We don't want to spook him. If he sees a bunch of cop cars rolling up, he'll run. We'll handle it ourselves for now." Hutchins gave us directions to the house and offered us the use of an unmarked car, which we accepted. By late afternoon, we were parked on a dirt road about 300 yards from 1847 Hickory Lane, hidden behind a stand of trees, watching the house through binoculars. The house looked exactly like it did in the photos. Beige siding, dark windows, overgrown grass. The silver Honda was still in the driveway, parked at an angle like someone had pulled in quickly and never bothered to straighten out. There were no lights on inside, no movement, no sign that anyone was home. We watched for 3 hours. The sun set and the temperature dropped, and still there was nothing. No lights, no movement. Just the house, sitting there in the growing darkness, looking more abandoned by the minute. "Maybe he's not here," Vega said finally. "The car's here. He could have switched vehicles, or someone could have picked him up. Maybe. But I didn't think so. There was something about the house that made me uneasy, though I couldn't put my finger on what it was. It was too still, too quiet, like it was holding its breath." At 9:47 p.m., a light came on in one of the back rooms. I grabbed the binoculars and focused on the window. The light was faint, flickering, like candlelight. I could see movement inside, a shadow passing across the wall. Someone was definitely in there. "That's him," Vega said. "Has to be." "We need to move now," I said, "before he realizes we're here." We called Hutchins and told him we were going in. He offered to send backup, but we declined. 2 marshals against 1 unarmed fugitive. The odds were in our favor. We approached the house on foot, moving slowly, staying in the shadows. The front door was unlocked, which should have been another warning sign. But we were focused on the job, on taking Caulfield into custody, and we didn't stop to think about why the door would be unlocked in an abandoned house. I pushed it open slowly, my hand on my weapon, and stepped inside. The interior was dark. Too dark. Even with my flashlight, I could barely see 5 feet in front of me. The air smelled wrong, not like dust or decay, but like something chemical. Antiseptic, like a hospital. "U.S. Marshals," I called out. "Raymond Caulfield, we have a warrant for your arrest. Come out with your hands up." No response. Vega and I moved through the house room by room, clearing each space systematically. The layout was simple. A living room, a kitchen, 2 bedrooms, a bathroom. But something was off. The rooms felt wrong. Too small or too large. The distances didn't match what I'd expected based on the floor plan. In the back bedroom, we found the source of the light. A single candle burning on a windowsill, but the room was empty. No furniture, no belongings, nothing. Just the candle. "Where is he?" Vega muttered. I scanned the room with my flashlight. The walls were bare, the floor covered in a thin layer of dust, but there were footprints in the dust. Fresh ones. Leading from the door to the window and then stopping. Just stopping in the middle of the room, like whoever had been walking had simply vanished. "Vega," I said quietly. "Look at this." He came over and shone his light on the footprints. I watched his face change as he processed what he was seeing. "That's not possible." "I know." We searched the rest of the house, but there was no sign of Caulfield. No hidden doors, no crawl space, no attic. Just empty rooms and that lingering smell of antiseptic. We checked the garage, the yard, even the car in the driveway. Nothing. By the time we left, it was past midnight. We sat in the unmarked car, staring at the house, trying to make sense of what we'd just seen. "He was in there," Vega said. "We saw the light. We saw the footprints." "I know. So where did he go?" I didn't have an answer, and that's what scared me. We went back to the motel in Harrodsburg and tried to sleep, but I couldn't. I kept thinking about the house, about the way the rooms had felt, about the footprints that ended in the middle of an empty floor, about the door that had been unlocked like we'd been expected. At some point, I must have dozed off because I woke to my phone buzzing. It was 6:23 a.m. Hutchins was calling. "Marshal Reeves," he said when I answered. "You need to get out to the house now." "Why? What happened?" "Someone called it in, said they saw lights on inside again, and..." He paused. "And the caller said they saw someone standing in the window, watching the street." We were at the house within 20 minutes. The silver Honda was still in the driveway. The front door was still unlocked. But this time, when we went inside, everything was different. The layout had changed. I'm not talking about furniture being moved. I'm talking about the rooms themselves being in different places. The kitchen, which had been on the left side of the house the night before, was now on the right. The back bedroom, where we'd found the candle, was now at the front. The bathroom, which had been down a short hallway, was now off the living room. Vega and I stood in the middle of the living room, turning slowly, trying to understand what we were seeing. "This isn't the same house," Vega said. "It has to be," I said. "We're at the same address, same car outside. Then how? I don't know." We searched the house again, more carefully this time, taking measurements, taking photos, documenting everything. But the more we looked, the less sense it made. The dimensions were wrong. The windows were in different places. Even the walls felt different. Thicker in some places, thinner in others. And we still couldn't find Raymond Caulfield. By mid-morning, we'd called in reinforcements, 2 more deputy marshals, a K-9 unit, and a team from the FBI. We set up a perimeter around the house and searched every inch of the property. The dog hit on something in the garage, Caulfield's scent probably, but there was no sign of where he'd gone. "He's playing with us," one of the FBI agents said. "He knows we're here, and he's messing with our heads." "How?" I asked. "How do you change the layout of a house overnight?" The agent didn't have an answer. We searched the house 3 more times that day. Each time the layout was different. Not drastically, just enough to make us doubt ourselves. A door that had been on the left was now on the right. A window that had faced the backyard now faced the side. Small changes, impossible changes. By evening, I was starting to question my own memory. Had the kitchen always been on the right? Had the bedroom always been at the front? I couldn't be sure anymore. And that terrified me more than anything else. That night, we set up cameras inside the house. Motion activated, infrared, covering every room. If Caulfield came back, we'd catch him. If the house changed again, we'd have proof. We watched the feeds from the unmarked car, Vega and I taking turns, each of us staring at the screens until our eyes burned. For hours, nothing happened. The house sat there, dark and still, the rooms empty. And then, at 2:34 a.m., every camera went dark at the same time. We were inside within 90 seconds. The cameras were still there, still recording, but the footage showed nothing but static. And the house had changed again. This time, there were more rooms that hadn't been there before. A narrow hallway leading to a door we'd never seen. A closet that opened into what looked like another bedroom. The house was growing. "We need to leave," Vega said. His voice was tight, controlled, but I could hear the fear underneath. "Right now." "We can't leave without Caulfield." "He's not here, Jen. He was never here. This is something else." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying this house isn't right, and we need to get out before—" He stopped. We both heard it at the same time. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming from somewhere deeper in the house, from one of the new rooms. I drew my weapon. "Raymond Caulfield, US Marshals, show yourself." The footsteps stopped. And then, from somewhere in the darkness, I heard a voice. It was faint, barely audible, but it was there. "You're in the wrong house." We stood, frozen, in the dark living room, our flashlights cutting narrow beams through the blackness, both of us listening to the silence that had swallowed the voice. The words echoed in my head. "You're in the wrong house." But that didn't make sense. We were at 1847 Hickory Lane. The address matched. The car outside matched. Everything matched except the house itself. "Did you hear that?" I whispered to Vega. "Yeah." His voice was steady, but his hand was tight on his weapon. "Where did it come from?" I swept my flashlight across the room, but the beam seemed weaker than it should have been, like the darkness was absorbing the light. Sounded like it came from the back, one of those new rooms that shouldn't exist. I know. We moved forward slowly, clearing corners, checking doorways, following proper procedure even though every instinct I had was screaming at me to leave. The hallway stretched ahead of us, longer than it should have been. I counted my steps. 15, 20, 25. The hallway in this house shouldn't have been more than 10 feet long, but we were still walking, still moving forward, and the walls on either side seemed to be closing in. "Vega," I said quietly, "how long is this hallway?" "Too long." We reached the door at the end. It was new, not just new to us, but actually new. The wood was fresh, the paint still tacky to the touch. I put my hand on the knob and looked back at Vega. He nodded. I pushed it open. The room beyond was empty. 4 walls, no windows, no furniture, nothing. Just bare drywall and a concrete floor. But the smell hit me immediately. That same antiseptic odor we'd noticed the first time we entered the house, but stronger now. Overwhelming. Like someone had dumped a gallon of bleach in the middle of the floor. In the center of the room was a single object, a folding chair, metal frame, vinyl seat, the kind you'd find in a church basement or a community center. Someone had been sitting there, recently. The seat was still warm. "Caulfield?" I called out. "If you're here, you need to show yourself. We're not leaving without you." No response. Vega walked around the perimeter of the room, checking the walls, tapping them with his knuckles. "Solid," he muttered. "No hidden panels, no doors, just a room. A room that wasn't here 12 hours ago. Yeah." I photographed the chair, the room, everything. I needed documentation, proof that we weren't losing our minds. But even as I took the photos, I felt that creeping sense of unreality, like I was documenting a dream. We backed out of the room and continued searching the house. Each room we entered felt slightly different from the last time we'd seen it. Not dramatically, just small changes. A light switch on the wrong wall, a window frame a few inches higher, a doorway that opened in instead of out. The kind of things you might not notice if you weren't paying attention. But once you saw them, you couldn't unsee them. In what had been the master bedroom, or what we thought had been the master bedroom, we found more evidence of occupation. A sleeping bag spread out on the floor, empty food wrappers, a battery-powered lantern. Someone had been living here. But the sleeping bag was old, faded, covered in dust. It looked like it had been there for years, not days. "This doesn't match Caulfield's profile," Vega said, crouching down to examine the sleeping bag. "He had money. He could have stayed in a hotel, rented an apartment. Why would he be camping out in an abandoned house? Maybe he ran out of money." The FBI traced credit card transactions from 2 weeks ago. He was staying at a Holiday Inn in Memphis. Then he disappears, and suddenly he's here, sleeping in a dusty sleeping bag? It doesn't add up. I knew he was right. Nothing about this case added up. But we were here, and Caulfield was somewhere in this house, or had been, and we needed to find him. We searched for another 2 hours, going through every room, every closet, every cabinet. We found more strange things. A stack of newspapers from 1987. A rotary phone that still had a dial tone when Vega picked it up, even though the house had no active phone service. A calendar on the kitchen wall showing the wrong year, 2003. "This is like a museum," Vega said. "Like someone's been collecting things from different times and just leaving them here. Or the house is remembering," I said without thinking. Vega looked at me. "What?" "Nothing. Ignore me. I'm tired." But I wasn't sure it was nothing, because the more time we spent in the house, the more I felt like we weren't alone. Not in the sense that Caulfield was hiding somewhere. In the sense that the house itself was watching us, waiting for something. We left at dawn and went back to the motel. Neither of us had slept in over 24 hours, and we were starting to make mistakes. I could feel it in the way my thoughts kept drifting, in the way I'd catch myself staring at nothing, losing track of what I was doing. "We need backup," Vega said as we sat in the motel room, drinking terrible coffee and trying to stay awake. "Real backup. A full tactical team, forensics, the works. And tell them what? That the house keeps changing, that rooms appear out of nowhere, they'll think we've lost it. Maybe we have." I looked at him. He was serious. "You think we're imagining this? I think we're exhausted. We're stressed, and we're operating in an environment that doesn't make sense. Carbon monoxide poisoning, maybe. or something in the water. There's got to be a rational explanation. And the cameras? The footage that went to static? He didn't have an answer for that. I pulled out my phone and started going through the photos I'd taken. The empty room with the chair, the sleeping bag, the calendar showing 2003. But as I scrolled through them, I noticed something strange. The photos were degrading. Not all of them, just the ones taken inside the house. The images were becoming grainy, pixelated like they were corrupting in real time. "Vega, look at this." He leaned over and I showed him the screen. The photo of the empty room was almost unrecognizable now, just a blur of gray and white pixels. "That's not normal," he said. "No, it's not." I checked the other photos. Same thing. Every image taken inside the house was deteriorating. Within minutes, they were completely gone, replaced by blank squares. "We need to go back," I said. "Are you insane? We need answers, and the only place we're going to get them is that house." Vega stared at me for a long moment. Then he sighed. "Fine, but we're not going alone this time. We're taking the full team." We called Hutchins and requested a joint operation with the sheriff's department. He agreed, though I could hear the skepticism in his voice when we tried to explain what we'd encountered. By early afternoon, we had 6 deputies, 2 more deputy marshals, and a forensics team assembled outside the house on Hickory Lane. Sheriff Hutchins himself was there, standing beside his cruiser, arms crossed, watching as we set up the perimeter. "I've been doing this job for 30 years, he said to me. "I've seen a lot of strange things. But a house that changes, that's a new one." "I know how it sounds," I said. "Do you? Because from where I'm standing, it sounds like you two have been working too hard and need some time off. Then come inside with us, see for yourself." He considered it, then he nodded. "All right, let's do this." We entered the house in force, 8 officers, weapons drawn, moving in formation. The layout was different again. The front door now opened directly into what looked like a dining room, even though there'd been a living room there before. The kitchen was to the left, or maybe to the right. I was losing track. The hallways seemed to shift as we moved through them, turning corners that hadn't been there, leading us to rooms we'd never seen. One of the deputies, a young guy named Barrett, stopped in the middle of what we thought was the living room. "This is wrong," he said. "This is all wrong." "What do you mean?" Hutchins asked. "I've been in this house before," Barrett said. 3 years ago, when Mrs. Bishop was still alive. We had a call about a suspicious person on the property. I came inside to check on her. And this isn't the same house. You're sure? Positive. The living room was bigger. The windows were on the other wall. And there was furniture. A couch, a TV, bookshelves. This room is completely different. Hutchins looked at me, and I saw the first crack in his skepticism. "All right," he said slowly. "Let's keep searching. But everyone stay together, no one goes off alone." We moved through the house as a group, documenting everything, taking measurements, comparing notes. The more we searched, the more discrepancies we found. Doors that led to nowhere. Windows that showed different views depending on which side of the room you looked from. A staircase that descended into what should have been the crawl space, but instead opened into another bedroom. In one of the back rooms, we found writing on the wall, carved into the drywall with something sharp. It was a single word repeated over and over, covering every surface. Leave. 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 "Who wrote this?" one of the deputies asked. "I don't know," I said, "but I think we should listen to it." We kept searching. In what we were calling the East Wing, though I had no idea if it was actually on the east side of the house, we found another room with a chair in the center. But this time, there was something else. A file folder sitting on the seat of the chair. I approached it carefully, like it might explode. The folder was manila, worn at the edges, held together with a rubber band. I picked it up and opened it. Inside were property records for 1847 Hickory Lane. But they were wrong. The documents showed the house as having 5 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, and over 3,000 square feet. The house we'd seen from the outside, the house on the property maps, was a single-story ranch with maybe 1,200 square feet. "This doesn't match," Vega said, looking over my shoulder. I know. There were other documents in the folder. Building permits from the 1970s, showing additions being made to the house. Contractor invoices, insurance claims. But none of it matched the physical structure we were standing in. At the bottom of the pile was a photograph, black and white, faded, showing a woman standing in front of the house. She was middle-aged, thin, with sharp features and dark eyes. On the back of the photo, written in faded ink, were the words, Eleanor Bishop, 1985. "That's her," Hutchins said. "That's Eleanor." I stared at the photo. There was something wrong with it, something I couldn't quite identify. And then I realized the house behind Eleanor in the photo wasn't the house we'd entered. It was bigger, darker, with more windows, more doors. It looked wrong. "Sheriff," I said, "you said you came into this house after Eleanor died. Do you remember what it looked like?" He frowned. "Like I said, I don't remember much. It was plain. Old furniture, nothing special." "But you remember the layout?" "Not really. Why?" "Because I'm starting to think you were never in this house." "None of us were." "What are you talking about?" I held up the photo. "Look at this house. Look at the one we're standing in. They're not the same. They've never been the same." Hutchins stared at the photo, and I saw the color drain from his face. "That's impossible, is it? Because we've been searching this place for hours, and we keep finding rooms that shouldn't exist. We keep seeing things that don't match any record, any memory, anything. What if this house isn't what we think it is? Then what is it?" I didn't have an answer, but I was starting to have a theory, and it scared me more than I wanted to admit. We decided to leave and regroup. The team filed out of the house one by one, checking each other off as we exited. But when we did a final count in the yard, we were missing someone, Deputy Barrett. "Where's Barrett?" Hutchins asked. "He was right behind me," one of the other deputies said. "I saw him in the hallway." We went back inside. "Barrett!" Hutchins called. "Deputy Barrett, respond." Nothing. We searched the house again, room by room, calling his name. But we couldn't find him, and worse, we couldn't find the rooms we'd just been in. The east wing, the room with the chair and the file folder, the hallway with the writing on the walls, all of it was gone, replaced by different rooms, empty rooms. "How is this possible?" Vega said. He was losing his composure now, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. "We were just in there, all of us. We all saw the same things, and now it's gone?" "We need to leave," I said. "Right now, everyone out. We'll call for state police, FBI, whoever we can get. But we're not staying in this house." We evacuated, all of us, standing in the front yard, staring at the house, trying to process what had just happened. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the property, and the house looked normal again. Just a plain ranch house with beige siding and dark windows. But Deputy Barrett was still inside. Somewhere. Hutchins radioed for backup, for search and rescue, for anyone who could help. Within an hour, we had 20 more officers on scene, along with K9 units and thermal imaging equipment. We searched the house again and again, using every tool we had, but we never found Barrett. He had simply vanished. By midnight, the search was called off. The official report would say that Deputy Barrett had left the scene without notifying anyone, that he'd walked away from the house and was probably confused or disoriented. But everyone who'd been there knew the truth. Barrett hadn't left. He'd disappeared, inside a house that shouldn't exist. Vega and I sat in the unmarked car, watching as the other officers packed up their equipment and left. The house sat there in the darkness, windows black, door closed, waiting. What happened to him? Vega asked quietly. I don't know. What is this place? I don't know that either. But I was starting to have ideas, and none of them were good. We didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. Instead, Vega and I drove back to Louisville and went straight to the county records office, which opened at 6 a.m. We were waiting at the door when the clerk arrived, badges ready, requesting every document related to 1847 Hickory Lane. The clerk, a woman in her 50s named Margaret, looked at us with tired eyes. That address again? You're the second people this week asking about that property. Second? I said. Who was the first? FBI agent, came in Monday. Said he was investigating fraud or something. Took copies of everything we had. Do you remember his name? She checked her log. Agent Deal, Daniel Deal. I looked at Vega. We both knew the FBI agents assigned to the Caulfield case, and there was no Daniel Deal on the team. Can you describe him? Vega asked. Margaret shrugged. Average height, brown hair, glasses. Looked like every other Fed who comes through here. Wore a suit, carried a briefcase, nothing special. Did he say anything else? Anything about why he was interested in the property? Not really, just that he needed the records for an investigation. He was polite, professional. I didn't think anything of it. We thanked her and took copies of everything she had. Property deeds, tax records, building permits, the works. Then we went to the Louisville field office and pulled every file related to Eleanor Bishop and the house on Hickory Lane. What we found didn't make sense. According to the property records, 1847 Hickory Lane had been owned by the Bishop family since 1968, when Thomas and Margaret Bishop purchased it from a previous owner named Harold Vance. The Bishops lived there until their deaths in the early 1990s, at which point their daughter Eleanor inherited it. She lived there alone until her death in 2019. Simple, straightforward. Except for the building permits. There were permits filed for additions to the house in 1973, 1981, 1995, and 2007. Each permit showed significant construction. New bedrooms, additional bathrooms, an expanded kitchen. But when we pulled the county inspector's reports, they all said the same thing. Construction not completed, permit expired. So they filed permits but never did the work, Vega said. Or they did the work without inspections, I said. Which would explain why the house doesn't match the records. But we've been inside. There's no evidence of major construction, no additions, no remodeling, nothing. It's just changing. I stared at the documents spread across the conference table. What if the construction was never physical? What if they were building something else? You're losing me. Think about it. Every permit was filed by Eleanor Bishop. Not her parents. Her. And every time we go into that house, it's different. Rooms appear. Rooms disappear. The layout changes. What if Eleanor was building something that exists differently? Vega looked at me like I'd lost my mind. Differently how? I don't know, but there's something wrong with that house. Something fundamental. And I think Eleanor knew about it. Maybe she was trying to control it, or contain it. We spent the rest of the day tracking down anyone who'd known Eleanor Bishop. Neighbors, delivery drivers, the mailman who'd found her body. Most people described her the same way Sheriff Hutchins had. Quiet, reclusive, unremarkable. But one neighbor, an elderly woman named Patricia Holcomb, told us something different. Eleanor was strange, Patricia said. We were sitting in her living room, a cluttered space filled with photos and knickknacks. I lived next door to her for 30 years, and I maybe spoke to her a dozen times. She didn't like visitors, didn't like anyone coming near the property. Did she ever talk about the house? I asked. Patricia nodded slowly. Once. It was back in the 90s, maybe 95 or 96. I'd gone over to borrow some sugar. My grandkids were visiting and I was making cookies. Eleanor answered the door, but wouldn't let me inside. She stood in the doorway, blocking my view, like she was hiding something. And I asked her if everything was all right. She looked at me with these intense eyes and she said, "The house is awake." Just like that. The house is awake. I felt a chill run down my spine. What did she mean by that? I don't know. I thought maybe she was losing it, going senile. But then she said something else. She said, "It's been awake since 1973, and I'm the only one who knows how to keep it calm." Did you report this to anyone? Why would I? She wasn't hurting anyone. She was just an eccentric old woman living alone. I figured she was talking about, I don't know, the house settling or something. Old houses make noises. You get attached to them, start thinking of them as alive. It happens. But you think she meant something else, Vega said. Patricia was quiet for a moment. I think Eleanor knew something about that house that the rest of us didn't. And I think whatever it was, it died with her. We thanked Patricia and left. As we walked back to the car, Vega said, 1973, that's the year of the first building permit. Yeah. So whatever happened to the house, whatever Eleanor was talking about, it started then. We need to find out what happened in 1973. We went back to the records office and pulled every document related to the house from that year. We found the building permit, filed in March 1973 for the construction of a new bedroom. But we also found something else, an insurance claim filed in April 1973 for damage to the property. The claim was denied, but the description was listed as structural damage due to settling. Settling, Vega said. That's normal for an old house, right? Usually, but look at the amount they claimed. $15,000. In 1973 dollars. That's not settling. That's major structural failure. We kept digging. We found contractor reports, engineer assessments, even a letter from the county building inspector recommending that the house be condemned. But the bishops had fought it. They'd hired lawyers, filed appeals, done everything they could to keep the house. And eventually, they'd won. The county had backed off, the condemnation order was dropped, and the bishops stayed. But the problems hadn't stopped. We found more insurance claims over the years, more reports of structural issues, more permits filed and expired. The house had been slowly falling apart for decades, or changing, or something. Why would they stay? Vega asked. If the house was that bad, why not just leave? Sell it? Move somewhere else? Maybe they couldn't, I said. Or maybe they thought they had to stay, to keep it calm. That evening, we went back to the house. We didn't go inside. We just sat in the car, watching the windows, trying to understand. The silver Honda was still in the driveway, untouched. The grass was still overgrown. Everything looked normal. But I knew it wasn't. At 9:15 p.m., a light came on in one of the windows. Not the same window as before, a different one. And I saw movement inside, a shadow passing across the wall. He's still in there, I said, or someone is. We called Hutchins and told him we were going in again. He didn't try to stop us, but I could hear the resignation in his voice. He knew we wouldn't find anything. He knew the house would be different again, but we had to try. This time, we brought more equipment. Motion sensors, cameras with backup batteries, even a surveyor's laser to measure the rooms precisely. We documented everything, and when we entered the house, we found exactly what we expected: a different layout. New rooms, changed dimensions, a house that refused to stay still. But this time, we also found something else. In one of the back bedrooms, we found Deputy Barrett's radio. It was sitting on the floor in the center of an empty room, turned off. No sign of Barrett, just the radio. Vega picked it up carefully. This is his. I recognize the serial number. So, he was here. But where is he now? We searched for another 2 hours, but we didn't find Barrett. We didn't find Raymond Caulfield. We didn't find anything except more empty rooms, more impossible architecture. More evidence that the house was something we didn't understand. At some point during the search, Vega stopped in the middle of a hallway. "Jen," he said quietly, "I think I've been in this hallway before." "We have. We've been through this house a dozen times. No, I mean, before this case, before any of this." He looked around, frowning. "This feels familiar, like I've seen it in a dream or something." "You're tired." "Maybe." But he didn't sound convinced. We left the house at midnight and went back to the motel. Neither of us spoke on the drive. We were both thinking the same thing. This case was never going to end. We could search the house 100 times, 1,000 times, and we'd never find what we were looking for, because the house didn't want to be found. That night, I dreamed about Eleanor Bishop. She was standing in the doorway of the house, blocking my view, just like Patricia Holcomb had described. But in my dream, I could see past her into the house beyond, and what I saw made me wake up in a cold sweat. The house was infinite. Rooms stretching into darkness, hallways that never ended, doors that opened into more doors. And somewhere in that infinite space I could hear footsteps. Dozens of them. Hundreds. All moving, all searching, all lost. When I woke up, Vega was calling. "We got a hit on Raymond Caulfield," he said. "Credit card transaction, gas station in Tennessee 2 hours ago." "Tennessee? But we just saw someone in the house." "I know. But unless Caulfield can be in 2 places at once, he's not in that house anymore. He's running again." We left Harrodsburg that morning, following the trail to Tennessee. The case continued, taking us through 3 more states, 6 more weeks of searching. We eventually found Caulfield in Arkansas, holed up in a motel, and took him into custody without incident. The case was closed. The fugitive was caught. But I never stopped thinking about the house on Hickory Lane, about Deputy Barrett, who was never found, who was officially listed as a missing person, his case still open, about the rooms that changed, the hallways that stretched, the footsteps in empty spaces. And most of all, I thought about Eleanor Bishop's words. The house is awake, because I think she was right. The house was awake, and I think it still is. I filed my report 3 weeks after we apprehended Raymond Caulfield. It was a standard fugitive apprehension report, detailing the investigation, the surveillance, the eventual arrest in Arkansas. I included every detail that mattered for the case file: witness statements, credit card transactions, the timeline of Caulfield's movements. But I left out everything about the house on Hickory Lane. I told myself it wasn't relevant. Caulfield hadn't been in the house when we found him. Whatever had happened there, whatever we'd experienced, didn't impact the case. The fugitive was caught. The warrant was served. That's all that mattered. But that's not why I left it out. I left it out because I knew no one would believe it. And because I wasn't sure I believed it myself anymore. Vega and I never talked about the house after we left Harrodsburg. Not officially. We'd reference it in passing sometimes. usually late at night when we were on surveillance for a different case, but we never went into detail. It was like we'd made an unspoken agreement to let it go, to pretend it had never happened. But I couldn't let it go, not completely. I started doing research in my spare time. Nothing official, just personal curiosity. I pulled property records for houses across the country, looking for similar patterns. Houses with unusual building permits, houses where people had disappeared. Houses that didn't match their descriptions. I found more than I expected. There were dozens of cases, maybe hundreds. Houses that were bigger on the inside than the outside. Houses where the layout changed depending on who was looking at it. Houses where people went missing and were never found. Most of the reports were dismissed as pranks or hoaxes or misunderstandings. But I knew better. I'd seen it myself. I found one case in particular that caught my attention. A house in Oregon, built in 1971, where a family of 4 had disappeared in 1978. The house had been searched extensively, but no trace of the family was ever found. The property was eventually condemned and demolished, but before it was torn down, several of the investigators reported strange experiences. Rooms that didn't match the floor plan. Hallways that seemed to shift. The same things we'd experienced in Harrodsburg. I contacted one of the retired investigators, a man named Frank Mercer, and asked him about it. He was reluctant to talk at first, but eventually he opened up. That house was wrong, he told me over the phone. I've been in law enforcement for 40 years, and I've seen a lot of things I can't explain. But that house was different. It was like it was alive, like it was watching us. And when we finally tore it down, I swear to God I felt relief, like we'd killed something that needed to die. Did you ever figure out what happened to the family? I asked. No, they just vanished, like they'd never existed. We searched that house top to bottom and we didn't find a thing. No bodies, no blood, no signs of struggle. They were just gone. Do you think they're still in there somehow? In the house? There was a long pause. I don't know, but I've had dreams about that place for 30 years. And in my dreams, I can still hear them, calling for help, lost in rooms that never end. I thanked him and hung up. And I realized that I wasn't the only one who'd experienced this. There were others, dozens of them, maybe more, all of them haunted by houses that shouldn't exist. I tried to find more information about 1847 Hickory Lane, but there wasn't much. The house was still standing, still listed in the county records as vacant. No one had tried to sell it. No one had gone back inside. It just sat there, waiting. I thought about Deputy Barrett sometimes, about where he might be, if he was still alive, if he was trapped somewhere in those infinite hallways, searching for a way out that didn't exist. The thought kept me up at night. 6 months after we closed the Caulfield case, I got a call from Sheriff Hutchins. He sounded tired, older than I remembered. "Marshal Reeves," he said. "I thought you should know. We had another incident at the house on Hickory Lane." My stomach dropped. What happened? A couple of teenagers broke in last week. Said they wanted to explore the abandoned house. One of them came back out 3 hours later, hysterical. The other one didn't come out at all. "Did you search the house?" "Yeah, spent 2 days going through it. Didn't find anything. The kid said his friend went down a hallway and just disappeared. Said the hallway kept getting longer and longer, and then his friend was gone." "What did you put in the report?" "Runaway? What else could I put? No one would believe the truth." "Have you thought about condemning the property? Tearing it down?" "We tried, filed the paperwork, but the county won't approve it. They say the house is structurally sound, that there's no reason to demolish it, and without probable cause, we can't force it. So it just stays there. Yeah, it just stays there." He paused. "Marshall, I need to ask you something. Do you remember what the inside of that house looked like? The layout?" I'm not sure anymore. Me neither. I've been trying to remember, trying to write down what I saw. But every time I think I have it, the details slip away. It's like my brain won't hold on to the information. I know what you mean. What do you think it is, that house? I didn't have an answer, not one that made sense. I don't know, Sheriff. But I think Eleanor Bishop was right. I think the house is awake. And I don't think it's going to sleep anytime soon. We hung up, and I sat there in my apartment, staring at the wall, thinking about the house. About the rooms that changed, about the people who disappeared, about the infinite hallways that existed somewhere between the walls. I pulled out the file I'd been keeping, my personal file, not the official one. It contained everything I'd found about 1847 Hickory Lane and similar houses. Newspaper clippings, property records, interview notes. I'd been collecting it all, trying to make sense of it, trying to find a pattern. But there was no pattern. Or, if there was, I couldn't see it. I thought about going back to Harrodsburg, about walking into that house one more time and trying to find Barrett, trying to understand what was happening. But I knew I wouldn't, because I was afraid that if I went back, I wouldn't come out either. That I'd become another person lost in those endless rooms, wandering forever, searching for an exit that didn't exist. So I closed the file and put it away, and I tried to forget. But I couldn't forget, not completely, because every time I closed my eyes I saw that house. I saw the hallways stretching into darkness. I heard the footsteps echoing through empty rooms, and I wondered how many people were trapped in there, walking through spaces that shouldn't exist, looking for a way home. A year after the case closed, I got a letter in the mail. No return address, just a postmark from Harrodsburg, Kentucky. Inside was a single photograph. It showed the house on Hickory Lane, taken from the street. But there was something wrong with it. The windows were different. The door was in a different place. Even the roof looked wrong, like the house had changed again. On the back of the photograph, written in neat handwriting, was a single sentence: "I'm still here." I don't know who sent it. I don't know if it was Barrett or one of the teenagers who disappeared, or someone else entirely. But I kept the photograph. I taped it to the wall next to my desk where I'd see it every day. A reminder that some cases never close, some mysteries never get solved, and some houses never let go of the people who enter them. Vega left the Marshals Service 6 months ago. He didn't give a reason, just turned in his badge and walked away. I tried to call him a few times, but he never answered. The last message I got from him was a text, sent at 2 in the morning. I keep dreaming about that house. I can't make it stop. I wanted to tell him I understood. I wanted to tell him that I had the same dreams, that I saw the same hallways, that I heard the same footsteps. But I didn't respond, because I didn't know what to say. I'm still with the service, still tracking fugitives, still serving warrants, still doing the job. But I'm different now, more cautious, more aware of the spaces I enter. Because I know now that some places are wrong, some places don't follow the rules. And once you've seen a place like that, once you've walked through rooms that change and hallways that stretch forever, you can't unsee it. I still have the photograph on my wall, and sometimes, late at night when I'm alone in the office, I look at it and wonder, is Deputy Barrett still in there? Is he still walking through those infinite rooms, searching for a way out? Is he still alive? I don't know, and I don't think I ever will. Because some questions don't have answers. Some cases don't have closures. And some houses are meant to stay mysterious. Last week, I got another call from Harrodsburg. Not from Hutchins this time, but from a real estate agent. She said she had a client interested in buying the property at 1847 Hickory Lane. She wanted to know if there were any legal issues with the house, any reason why the sale couldn't go through. I told her the truth. There were no legal issues. The house was clean, free and clear. But I also told her something else. I told her that anyone who buys that house should be very, very careful, because the house is awake, and it's always watching. She laughed. She thought I was joking. I wasn't. The sale went through 2 weeks ago. A young couple bought the house for $30,000, which is cheap even for rural Kentucky. They said they were going to renovate it, turn it into their dream home. I saw their photo in the local paper, standing in front of the house, smiling, holding hands. I hope they're careful. I hope they pay attention to the rooms. I hope they notice when the layout changes, when the hallways get longer, when the doors lead to places that shouldn't exist. But I don't think they will, because most people don't notice these things. Most people walk through their homes every day and never realize that the walls are shifting, that the rooms are rearranging themselves, that the house is alive. Most people don't notice until it's too late. I keep the photograph on my wall, and every morning I look at it and remember. I remember the rooms that changed, the hallways that stretched forever, the footsteps in empty spaces, the people who disappeared. And I remember Deputy Barrett's last words, crackling over the radio just before we lost contact. "The house is bigger than I thought. I can't find the exit. It keeps moving. God, it keeps moving." We never heard from him again. The house on Hickory Lane is still there, still waiting, still awake, and somewhere inside, in rooms that don't exist on any map, in hallways that stretch into infinity, people are walking, searching, lost, and they always will be, because the house never sleeps, and it never lets go. I close my eyes, and I see those hallways. I hear those footsteps, and I know, somewhere deep in the back of my mind, that one day I'll go back. I'll walk through that door one more time. I'll search those rooms. I'll follow those corridors into the darkness. And maybe I'll find Barrett. Maybe I'll find the others. Maybe I'll find a way to put them to rest. Or maybe I'll become one of them, another lost soul, wandering through infinite space, searching for an exit that doesn't exist. I don't know, and that's what scares me most. Because with the house on Hickory Lane, you never know. You never know if you're going to find what you're looking for. You never know if you're going to make it out. You never know if the house will let you leave. All you know is that once you go in, once you walk through that door and into those shifting rooms, you're part of it, forever. The house is awake, and it's waiting. It's always waiting. The call came in at 11:43 p.m. on a Tuesday in March. A man had walked into the federal building in downtown Chicago, approached the security desk, and calmly announced that he was turning himself in. He said his name was Michael Dreyer, that he was wanted on federal charges, and that he was tired of running. Security called us immediately. That's protocol when someone surrenders voluntarily. US Marshals handle the intake, verify the warrant, process the arrest. Usually it's straightforward. Usually it takes about an hour. The fugitive sits in an interview room. We run their information through the system, confirm their identity, and transport them to the appropriate facility. This case took 14 hours, and by the end of it I wasn't sure we'd arrested the right person, or any person at all. My name is Deputy US Marshal Robert Klein, and I've been with the service for 13 years. 13 years of tracking people who don't want to be found, of serving warrants at dawn, of standing outside motel rooms and abandoned warehouses waiting for someone to make a mistake. I've arrested murderers and drug dealers and white-collar criminals who'd stolen millions. I've seen people break down and confess everything the moment they saw my badge, and I've seen people fight until the very end, refusing to accept that their run was over. But I've never had someone walk in and surrender who'd already been in custody for 3 years. I arrived at the federal building at midnight. My partner, Deputy Marshal Angela Torres, met me in the lobby. She was younger than me, only 6 years on the job, but she was sharp and thorough, the kind of officer who noticed details other people missed. "What do we know?" I asked, as we took the elevator up to the 3rd floor. "White male, mid-40s, says his name is Michael Dreyer. No ID on him, no wallet, no phone, nothing. Just walked in off the street and said he wanted to surrender." "What's he wanted for?" "That's the weird part," Torres said. "I ran his name before you got here. Michael Dreyer. There's a warrant, federal charges for bank fraud and identity theft. But according to the system, he was already arrested 3 years ago." "Mistaken identity?" "That's what I thought. But the guy downstairs is insistent. Says he's Michael Dreyer, says he's the one we've been looking for." We reached the interview room on the 3rd floor. Through the one-way glass, I could see him. White male, probably mid-40s like Torres had said, average height, brown hair going gray at the temples. He was wearing jeans and a plain gray hoodie, sitting calmly at the table with his hands folded in front of him. He looked tired but composed, like someone who'd made a decision and was at peace with it. "Let's talk to him," I said. We entered the room, and the man looked up. His eyes were clear, steady, no sign of intoxication or mental instability. He stood up when we came in, which was unusual. Most fugitives stay seated, either out of defiance or exhaustion. But this guy stood, like he was greeting guests in his home. "Thank you for coming," he said. His voice was calm, polite. "I know it's late." "Sit down, please," I said, taking the chair across from him. Torres stood by the door, notebook ready. The man sat. "My name is Michael Dreyer. I'm turning myself in on federal charges. I believe there's a warrant for my arrest." "There is," I said. "Or there was. But our records show that Michael Dreyer was arrested 3 years ago, in Kansas City." The man frowned. "No, that's not right. I've never been arrested. I've been running for 5 years. 5 years. Yes, since 2018. I committed fraud. I stole money from multiple banks using false identities. I know what I did. I'm ready to face the consequences." I glanced at Torres. She was already pulling up the file on her tablet. "Mr. Dreyer," I said, "I need to ask you some questions to verify your identity. What's your date of birth?" "September 14th, 1979. Torres checked the file and nodded. It matched. "Social Security number?" He recited it. Again, it matched. "Place of birth?" "Des Moines, Iowa." Match. "Mother's maiden name?" "Patterson." Match. Every answer he gave matched the information in our system. But according to that same system, Michael Dreyer was already in federal custody. He'd been sentenced to 8 years for bank fraud and was currently serving his time at FCI Englewood in Colorado. "Mr. Dreyer," I said slowly, "I need you to understand something. According to our records, you were arrested in Kansas City in March of 2020. You were tried, convicted, and sentenced. You're currently in prison." The man stared at me. "That's impossible." "I'm looking at the records right now. Michael Dreyer, DOB September 14th, 1979, SSN matching yours. Arrested by FBI agents in Kansas City on March 8th, 2020. Surrendered peacefully at a hotel. Pleaded guilty. Sentenced to 8 years. No." The man shook his head. "I wasn't in Kansas City in 2020. I was in Oregon. I was working under an assumed name trying to stay off the grid. I've never been arrested. I've never even spoken to the FBI. Then who's in prison right now? Torres asked. I don't know, the man said. But it's not me. I'm Michael Dreyer. I'm the one you're looking for. I studied his face, looking for signs of deception. But he seemed genuinely confused. And more than that, he seemed scared, like he was realizing that something was very wrong. Do you have any identification? I asked. Driver's license, passport, anything? No, I destroyed everything years ago. I've been living under fake names, paying cash for everything. I thought it would keep me safe. Safe from who? From you. From law enforcement. I knew eventually I'd get caught, but I wasn't ready to face it until now. I leaned back in my chair. Okay, let's say you are who you say you are. Why turn yourself in now, after 5 years? The man was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, because I saw him. Saw who? Myself. 2 weeks ago, I was in Springfield, Illinois. I was at a gas station filling up my car, and I saw myself, walking across the parking lot. Same face, same height, same build. It was like looking in a mirror, and when he saw me, he stopped. We just stared at each other for maybe 10 seconds, and then he got in a car and drove away. You think you saw your doppelganger? Torres said, skepticism clear in her voice. I don't know what I saw, but it scared me. I started thinking maybe I was losing my mind. Maybe the stress of running had finally broken me. And I realized I couldn't keep living like this. So I decided to turn myself in, to end it. I exchanged a look with Torres. Excuse us for a moment, I said to Dreyer. We stepped out of the room and closed the door. What do you think? Torres asked. I think he believes what he's saying, but it doesn't make sense. We have a Michael Dreyer in custody. Same name, same DOB, same SSN. How can there be 2 of them? Identity theft, Torres suggested. Maybe someone stole his information, got arrested using his name. But the person in prison would have said something, would have fought the charges, claimed mistaken identity. Unless they were the real thief and our guy in there is the one using a stolen identity. Then why would he turn himself in? Torres didn't have an answer. We went back into the room. Mr. Dreyer, I said, we're going to need to verify your identity. Fingerprints, photos, the works. And we're going to need to contact the facility where the other Michael Dreyer is being held. This is going to take some time. I understand, he said. I'm not going anywhere. We processed him, took his fingerprints, his photo, a DNA swab. Then we sent all of it to the FBI for analysis. While we waited for the results, I pulled up the file on the Michael Dreyer who was in prison. The arrest report was straightforward. FBI agents had tracked him to a hotel in Kansas City based on a tip from a bank employee who'd recognized him from surveillance footage. They'd knocked on his door at 6 a.m., and he'd surrendered without resistance. He'd been cooperative throughout the entire process, had waived his right to trial, and had pleaded guilty to all charges. There were photos in the file. Mugshots, taken the day of his arrest. I pulled them up on the screen and compared them to the photos we'd just taken of the man in the interview room. They were identical, not similar. Not close. Identical. Same face, same hair, same slight scar above the left eyebrow. Even the expression was the same. Tired, resigned, like someone who'd accepted their fate. Torres, I said quietly, look at this. She came over and looked at the screen. I watched her face change as she realized what she was seeing. That's the same person. Yeah. How is that possible? I don't know. The fingerprint results came back an hour later. The prints from the man in the interview room matched the prints on file for Michael Dreyer. They also match the prints taken from the Michael Dreyer in prison 3 years ago. This is wrong, Torres said, staring at her tablet. The system must have glitched, or someone entered the data incorrectly. Both sets of prints can't belong to the same person, I agreed. It's biologically impossible. So, what do we do? I thought about it. We need to talk to the other Michael Dreyer, the one in prison. See what he has to say about this. We called FCI Englewood. It was 2 in the morning, but the duty officer was helpful. He confirmed that Michael Dreyer was currently in their facility, serving his sentence. He'd been a model inmate. No disciplinary issues, no problems. He was scheduled for release in 5 years. Can we speak with him? I asked. Now? It's 2 in the morning. It's important. We have a situation that requires immediate clarification. The duty officer sighed. I'll see what I can do. Give me 20 minutes. While we waited, I went back into the interview room. The man who called himself Michael Dreyer was sitting exactly as we'd left him, hands folded on the table, staring at the wall. Mr. Dreyer, I said. The fingerprints came back. They match the prints on file for Michael Dreyer, but they also match the prints of the man who's currently in prison, which shouldn't be possible. The man looked at me. I don't understand. Neither do we. But we're going to get to the bottom of this. I need you to think carefully. Is there any reason why someone would have your fingerprints? Did you ever give them to anyone? Did you ever have them copied or recorded for any reason? No. I mean, not beyond the normal things. I had fingerprints taken when I got my driver's license, I think. But that was years ago, before any of this started. What about family? Do you have any siblings? A brother, younger, but we haven't spoken in years, and we're not twins or anything. We don't even look alike. What's his name? David Dreyer. Torres made a note. We'll look into that. The call came through from FCI Englewood 25 minutes later. They'd woken up Michael Dreyer and brought him to a phone. The duty officer had him on speakerphone in their security office. Mr. Dreyer, I said, this is Deputy US Marshal Robert Klein. I need to ask you some questions. Okay. The voice on the other end of the line sounded sleepy but calm. What's this about? Can you confirm your identity for me? Full name and date of birth. Michael Dreyer, September 14th, 1979. How long have you been at FCI Englewood? 3 years, since my sentencing. And you were arrested in Kansas City in March of 2020? Yes, at the Marriott on Main Street. 2 FBI agents. I remember their names, Agent Harrison and Agent Polk. I checked the file. The names matched. Mr. Dreyer, I need to ask you something strange. Have you ever seen anyone who looks like you? Someone who could be your double? There was a pause on the other end. My double? Yes, someone who looks exactly like you. Another pause, longer this time. Why are you asking me this? Just answer the question, please. I don't know. Maybe? I mean, I saw someone once, back when I was running, before I was arrested. At a rest stop in Nebraska. Guy looked like me, similar build, similar face. But I didn't think much of it. People look alike sometimes. When was this? I don't know, maybe 2019? I can't remember exactly. Mr. Dreyer, there's someone here who claims to be you. He walked into our office tonight and said he's turning himself in. He has your fingerprints, your date of birth, your social security number, everything matches. But you're already in custody. Can you explain that? The silence on the other end of the line stretched out for so long that I thought the connection had dropped. Then, finally, he spoke. That's not possible. That's what we thought too. Are you saying someone's impersonating me? We don't know what we're saying, that's why we're asking you. Is there any reason why someone would have your exact fingerprints? No. That's not possible. Fingerprints are unique, you can't fake them. We know. But we have 2 sets of prints, both identical, both belonging to Michael Dreyer. Yours and his. The man on the phone didn't say anything for a long time. Then, in a quieter voice, he said, "Can I ask you something?" "Go ahead." "This person who's there, the one claiming to be me, what does he look like?" I glanced at Torres. "He looks like you, exactly like you, according to the photos in your file. Can you ask him something for me?" "What?" "Ask him if he remembers Des Moines. Ask him if he remembers the house on Maple Street." I put him on hold and went back into the interview room. The man was still sitting there, calm and patient. "Mr. Dreyer," I said, "the person we spoke to in Colorado asked me to ask you something. He wants to know if you remember Des Moines, the house on Maple Street." The man's face changed, not dramatically, but enough for me to notice. His eyes widened slightly, and his hands tightened on the table. "Yes," he said quietly. "I remember." "What was on Maple Street?" "That's where I grew up. My parents' house. I lived there until I was 18. I went back to the phone. He says yes, he remembers. He says he grew up there. The man in Colorado was quiet. Then he said, "That's impossible." "Why?" "Because I grew up in that house. It was my childhood home. And I know for a fact that no one else lived there. My parents owned it. Just us. Just our family. Maybe you lived there at different times." "No, I was there from 1985 until 1997. If he says he grew up there, and I grew up there, we would have been there at the same time. We would have seen each other." "Unless you are the same person," I said, not believing the words even as I said them. "That's impossible." "I know, but we're running out of rational explanations." The man in Colorado didn't respond. I heard him breathing on the other end of the line, steady but fast, like he was trying to calm himself down. Finally, he said, "I want to see him." "What?" "I want to see the person who's claiming to be me." "Can you arrange that?" "You want us to transport you here, from Colorado?" "Yes. I need to see him. I need to know who he is." I thought about it. It was highly irregular, but these were highly irregular circumstances. I'll have to get approval. It might take a few days. I don't care how long it takes. I need to see him. We ended the call. Torres and I stood in the hallway outside the interview room, both of us trying to process what we'd just heard. "This is insane," Torres said. 2 people with the same fingerprints, the same face, the same memories. It's not possible. I know. So what do? We keep digging. We find out who these people really are. And we figure out which one is the real Michael Dreyer. What if they both are? I looked at her. "What are you saying?" "I don't know. But we have 2 men with identical fingerprints, identical faces, identical histories. What if they're both telling the truth? What if they're both Michael Dreyer? That's not possible. Then explain the fingerprints." I couldn't, and that scared me more than anything else about this case. We kept the man who'd surrendered in a holding cell overnight while we continued our investigation. I barely slept, spending most of the night going through files, looking for some explanation. I checked birth records, medical records, criminal histories. I contacted the brother, David Dreyer, but he didn't answer. I left messages, but he never called back. By morning, I still didn't have answers, just more questions. The DNA results came back at 9 a.m. The DNA from the man in our custody matched the DNA on file for Michael Dreyer. It also matched the DNA from the Michael Dreyer in prison. "This is wrong," Torres said, staring at the results. "DNA doesn't lie. If two people have the same DNA, they're either identical twins or they're the same person." He said he's not a twin. Then he's lying, or the system is wrong, or... She trailed off, not wanting to finish the thought. Or what? Or something else is going on, something we don't understand. I arranged for Michael Dreyer to be transported from FCI Englewood to Chicago. It took 3 days to get the paperwork approved, but eventually he was on a transport van heading our way. During those 3 days, we kept the man who'd surrendered in custody, running every test we could think of. Medical exams, psychiatric evaluations, polygraphs. Everything came back normal. He was physically healthy, mentally stable, and according to the polygraph, he was telling the truth. He believed he was Michael Dreyer. On the morning of the 4th day, the transport van arrived. They brought the prisoner in through the back entrance, cuffed and shackled, wearing an orange jumpsuit with FCI Englewood stenciled on the back. He looked tired, confused, but also curious, like he needed to see this through. We put him in a different interview room and let him sit for a few minutes while we prepared. Then Torres and I brought the first Michael Dreyer, the one who'd surrendered, into the observation room. We stood behind the one-way glass, looking at the man in the orange jumpsuit. "That's me," the first Dreyer said quietly. That's my face. Are you sure?" "Yes. I mean, that's what I look like, isn't it? That's my face." I studied him. His hands were shaking. "Do you recognize him?" "No, I mean, he looks like me, but I don't know him. I've never seen him before." We brought the two men into the same room, face to face, identical in every way. Same height, same build, same face, same scar above the left eyebrow. They sat across from each other, staring, neither one speaking. Finally, the one in the jumpsuit said, "Who are you?" "I'm Michael Dreyer," the first one said. "Who are you?" "I'm Michael Dreyer." They stared at each other. The silence in the room was suffocating. "This is impossible," the one in the jumpsuit said. "You can't be me. I'm me. I am you. No, you're not. You're someone else. Someone pretending." "I'm not pretending. I'm Michael Dreyer. I grew up on Maple Street in Des Moines. My mother's name was Patricia. My father's name was Richard. I had a brother named David. I went to Lincoln High School. I worked at First National Bank before I started stealing. I know everything about Michael Dreyer because I'm Michael Dreyer." The one in the jumpsuit shook his head. "So am I. Everything you just said, that's my life, my memories, my history. You can't have the same memories as me. It's not possible." "Then how do you explain this?" the first one said. "How do you explain the fact that we have the same face, the same fingerprints, the same DNA? How do you explain the fact that we're both here, both claiming to be the same person?" "I don't know," the one in the jumpsuit said. His voice was rising, panic creeping in. "But you're not me. You can't be me. I'm me. So am I." They kept arguing, going in circles, each one insisting they were the real Michael Dreyer, each one unable to prove it. Torres and I watched from behind the glass, both of us feeling a growing sense of unease. "This can't be real," Torres said. "This has to be some kind of elaborate scam, identity theft, twins separated at birth, something. There has to be a rational explanation." "Then what is it?" I asked. She didn't have an answer. We separated them again and spent the next several hours interviewing each one individually, asking them detailed questions about their lives, their memories, their experiences. Every answer they gave was identical. Same childhood stories, same family details, same memories of committing fraud. It was like they were reading from the same script. But they weren't. They were both genuinely confused, both genuinely scared, and both genuinely convinced that they were Michael Dreyer. Late that night, after everyone else had gone home, I sat alone in my office, staring at the 2 case files spread out on my desk. Same name, same face, same history, same fingerprints, same DNA. 2 men who were, by every measurable standard, the same person. But they couldn't be. It was impossible. I thought about what Torres had said. What if they're both telling the truth? And I realized, with a chill that went straight to my bones, that maybe they were. The next morning, I called a meeting with my supervisor, District Chief Marshal William Hendricks. He was a career officer with 30 years in the service, the kind of man who'd seen everything and didn't rattle easily. But when I explained the situation, 2 Michael Dryers, identical in every way, both claiming to be the same person, I saw something I'd never seen before in his eyes. Uncertainty. "Walk me through this again," Hendricks said, leaning back in his chair. Slowly, I went through it all. The initial surrender, the fingerprint matches, the DNA results, the transport from Colorado, the face-to-face meeting where 2 identical men had stared at each other in confusion and fear. Hendricks listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "What's your theory?" "I don't have one, sir. Every rational explanation we've come up with doesn't hold up under scrutiny. They're not twins. They have the same DNA, not just similar. They're not one person pretending to be 2. We have documented evidence of both of them existing in different places at different times. And they're not using stolen identities. They both have memories that go back decades, memories that match perfectly." "So, what are you saying?" "I'm saying I don't know what's happening, and that scares me." Hendricks stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the Chicago skyline. "I've been doing this job for a long time, Deputy. I've seen frauds. I've seen elaborate cons. I've seen people do incredible things to avoid prosecution, but I've never seen anything like this. What do you want us to do?" He turned back to me. "Keep investigating. Dig deeper. There's an explanation somewhere, and you need to find it. In the meantime, we're going to need to bring in some experts. Forensic specialists, psychologists, maybe even someone from the academic community who can help us make sense of this. And the 2 Dryers? Keep them separated. Don't let them communicate. And for God's sake, don't let this leak to the press. If word gets out that we have 2 men with identical fingerprints and DNA, we're going to have a media circus on our hands." I spent the next week digging into every aspect of Michael Dryer's life. I tracked down his brother, David, and finally got him on the phone. He lived in Seattle now, working as a software engineer, and he hadn't spoken to Michael in over a decade. "We had a falling out," David said when I asked about their relationship. "Money issues, family drama, the usual stuff. I cut ties with him back in 2010. "When's the last time you saw him?" "Christmas 2009. At our mother's house. Why? Did you notice anything unusual about him?" "Unusual how?" "I can't give you specifics, but anything strange, anything that stood out." David was quiet for a moment. "Actually, yeah. There was something. Michael seemed, I don't know, distracted. Like he wasn't all there, and he kept asking me weird questions." "What kind of questions?" "Questions about our childhood. Like he was trying to confirm memories. He'd ask me if I remembered specific things, a trip we took to Wisconsin, a dog we had when we were kids, stuff like that. And when I'd answer, he'd seem relieved, like he'd been worried I'd say something different." "Did you think that was strange?" "At the time, no. I figured he was just being nostalgic. But looking back now, yeah, it was weird. It was like he was checking to make sure his memories were real. And you haven't seen him since? No, I heard he got arrested a few years ago, but I didn't reach out. We weren't on speaking terms. David, I need to ask you something important. Did Michael have any siblings besides you? Any twins? Any other brothers or sisters? No, just me. You're sure? Positive. My mom had complications after I was born. She couldn't have any more kids. It was just the two of us. I thanked him and hung up. Another dead end. Torres had been running down other leads. She'd contacted the FBI agents who'd arrested the Michael Dreyer in Kansas City, Harrison and Polk, and interviewed them about the arrest. Both agents confirmed that it had been straightforward. They'd received a tip, tracked Dreyer to the hotel, and took him into custody without incident. Did he say anything unusual during the arrest? Torres had asked. Not really, Agent Harrison had told her. He was calm, resigned, said he knew we'd catch up with him eventually. The only weird thing was what he said in the car on the way to the field office. What did he say? He asked if we were real. We thought he was being sarcastic, but he seemed genuinely concerned. He kept looking at us like he wasn't sure we were actually there. Did he explain what he meant? No, and we didn't push it. Figured he was just stressed from being arrested. Torres also tracked down the employees at the bank where Michael Dreyer had worked before his crimes. Most of them remembered him as quiet, competent, unremarkable. But one woman, a former colleague named Susan Martinez, had a different memory. Michael was always a little odd, Susan told Torres over the phone. Nice enough, but there was something off about him. He'd sometimes seem confused about things, like he'd forget where his desk was, or he wouldn't recognize people he'd worked with for years. We thought maybe he had early-onset dementia or something. When did this start? I don't remember exactly, maybe 2015 or 2016. Around the time he started acting weird in other ways, too. What other ways? He'd sometimes call in sick, but then we'd see someone who looked exactly like him in the building. Same face, same clothes. We'd ask him about it the next day, and he'd insist he'd been homesick, that we must have been mistaken. But I know what I saw. You saw someone who looked like Michael Dreyer in the building while he was supposedly sick at home. Multiple times, at least 3 or 4. It got to the point where some of us joked that he had an evil twin or something. After 2 weeks of investigation, we'd gathered a mountain of information but no clear answers. We had 2 men who were genetically identical, who had identical fingerprints, who shared the same memories. We had eyewitness accounts of Michael Dreyer seeming confused about his own identity years before his arrest, and we had reports of him being seen in 2 places at once. None of it made sense. I decided to bring in an outside expert. Dr. Sarah Brennan was a forensic psychologist who'd consulted with law enforcement on several high-profile cases. She specialized in identity disorders and false confessions. If anyone could make sense of this, it was her. Dr. Brennan arrived on a Monday morning and spent the entire day interviewing both Michael Dreyer separately. She ran them through a battery of psychological tests, cognitive assessments, and memory evaluations. At the end of the day, she sat down with me and Torres in my office. "Well?" I asked. "What's your assessment?" Dr. Brennan looked troubled. "I've never seen anything like this. Both men are psychologically sound. No signs of dissociative identity disorder, no evidence of psychosis or delusion. They're both of above-average intelligence with excellent memory recall, and they both genuinely believe they are Michael Dreyer. So, what's your explanation?" "I don't have one, at least not one that makes sense within our current understanding of psychology and identity. The only conclusion I can draw is that somehow both of these men have the same consciousness, the same sense of self. It's as if the identity of Michael Dreyer exists in two separate bodies simultaneously. That's not possible, Torres said. I know, but I can't find any other explanation that fits the evidence. What about folie à deux? I suggested. Shared delusion. I considered that, but folie à deux requires prolonged contact between the individuals, usually in isolation from others. These two men have never met before, as far as we can determine. They couldn't have developed a shared delusion independently. Then what are we dealing with? Dr. Brennan shook her head. I don't know, but I can tell you this. Both of these men are terrified. They're experiencing something that shouldn't be possible, and they don't understand it any more than we do. That night, I stayed late at the office, reviewing everything we had. Case files, interview transcripts, forensic reports, psychological assessments. I was looking for something, anything, that might provide a clue. Around midnight, I found it. I was going through the financial records, tracking the fraudulent transactions that Michael Dreyer had made over the years. There were dozens of them spread across multiple states, using various false identities. But when I plotted them on a timeline, I noticed something strange. There were overlaps. Times when transactions were made in two different states on the same day, sometimes within hours of each other. A purchase in California at 10 a.m., another in Nevada at 2 p.m. Distances that would be impossible to cover in that time frame. I pulled up the surveillance footage from some of the banks where the transactions had occurred. And there he was, Michael Dreyer, walking up to ATMs, making withdrawals, using fake IDs. But the timestamps didn't work. He couldn't have been in both places at once, unless there were two of him, which should have been impossible. I called Torres. I found something. Come to the office, now. She arrived 20 minutes later, and I showed her what I'd discovered. We spent the next 3 hours going through every transaction, every piece of surveillance footage, every credit card statement. And the pattern was undeniable. Michael Dreyer had been in two places at once, not just recently, for years, since at least 2015. How is this possible? Torres asked. I don't know, but it explains why he was so successful at evading capture. The FBI was chasing one person, but there were two of him, maybe more. More? Think about it. If there can be two Michael Dryers, why not 3 or 4? How many versions of him could be out there? Torres looked sick. We need to tell Hendricks. We briefed Hendricks the next morning. To his credit, he didn't dismiss our findings. He listened carefully, studied the evidence, and then made a decision. We need to expand this investigation, he said. I want you to check every database we have access to. DMV records, passport applications, employment histories. Look for any other instances of Michael Dreyer appearing in multiple places at once. If there are more of him out there, we need to find them. We spent the next week doing exactly that. And what we found was disturbing. There were at least 6 documented instances of Michael Dreyer being in 2 places simultaneously. A driver's license photo taken in Iowa on the same day he'd renewed a different license in Missouri. Employment records showing him working 2 different jobs in 2 different cities on the same day. Security footage from airports showing him boarding flights to different destinations at the same time. This has been going on for years, Torres said, staring at the evidence spread across the conference table. Since at least 2015, maybe earlier. How did no one notice? Because no one was looking, I said. The system isn't designed to catch something like this. When someone's fingerprints match, we assume it's the same person. We don't check to see if that person was also somewhere else at the same time. But now we know, so what do? We find out how many there are. We created a task force, pulling in agents from multiple federal agencies. The FBI, Secret Service, Homeland Security, everyone who might have information about Michael Dreyer or his crimes. We set up a command center and started mapping out every known instance of him appearing anywhere in the country. The map was terrifying. Dozens of sightings, scattered across the United States, all occurring simultaneously. It was like Michael Dreyer was everywhere at once. And then we made another discovery. One of the FBI agents on the task force, a woman named Chen, was running database searches for any open cases involving identity fraud. She found something that made her call me immediately. "Deputy Klein, you need to see this," she said. I went to her desk, and she showed me a case file. It was from 2013, 6 years before the first official arrest of Michael Dreyer. A man had been found dead in a hotel room in St. Louis, apparent suicide. The body had been badly decomposed by the time it was discovered, but the identification in the wallet said Michael Dreyer. "Did they confirm the identity?" I asked. Fingerprints matched, DNA matched. It was officially ruled a suicide. Case closed. So there was a third one, and he's dead. Maybe. Or maybe there are more, and this is just the first one who died. I felt cold. "Run a search. I want to know if there are any other deaths connected to the name Michael Dreyer." She ran the search. The results came back an hour later. 7 deaths. All listed as Michael Dreyer. All with matching fingerprints and DNA. Dates ranging from 2011 to 2021. Suicides, accidents, 1 homicide. All officially closed cases. "Jesus Christ," Torres whispered. "How many of him are there?" "I don't know, but we need to find out." We brought both of the Michael Dryers we had in custody together again. This time, I showed them the evidence. The deaths, the simultaneous sightings, the proof that there were multiple versions of them out there. "Do either of you remember these?" I asked, showing them the death certificates. They both stared at the documents, confused. The first Dreyer, the one who'd surrendered, shook his head. "No, I'm not dead. I'm right here. But someone with your fingerprints, your DNA, your face, he died in St. Louis in 2013. How do you explain that?" "I can't." I turned to the second Dreyer, the one from Colorado. "What about you? Do you remember any of these?" He was pale, his hands shaking. "No, but I've had dreams. Dreams about dying. Different ways, falling, drowning, gunshots. I always thought they were just nightmares, but what? But what if they weren't dreams? What if they were memories? Memories from other versions of me?" The room went silent. Everyone was staring at him. "That's not possible," Torres said. "Nothing about this is possible," the second Dreyer said. "But it's happening. We're here. Multiple versions of the same person, all existing at the same time. And apparently, some of us have died. So maybe the memories carry over somehow. Maybe when one of me dies, the others remember it." I didn't want to believe him, but I couldn't deny that it made a strange kind of sense. "If that's true," I said slowly, "then we need to find all of you, every version, before more of you die." "Why would we be dying?" the first Dreyer asked. "I don't know, but 7 deaths in 10 years? That's not coincidence. Something is happening to you, to all of you." We expanded the investigation again, this time looking for living versions of Michael Dreyer. We sent alerts to every law enforcement agency in the country, asking them to report any sightings or interactions with someone matching his description. The responses came in quickly, too quickly. Within a week, we had over 50 reports of Michael Dreyer sightings from across the country. Some of them were obviously mistakes or false alarms, but at least 20 of them appeared to be legitimate. 20 different versions of Michael Dreyer, all living separate lives, all apparently unaware of the others. "This is impossible," Hendricks said when I showed him the reports. "One person can't exist in 20 different bodies." "But he does," I said. "The evidence is overwhelming. Michael Dreyer isn't just one person anymore. He's fractured somehow, split across multiple versions of himself." "How? How does that happen?" "I don't know, but I think it started in 2015. That's when the first reports of unusual behavior came in, when coworkers started seeing him in 2 places at once. Something happened to him that year, something that caused him to split. What could cause that? I have no idea, but we need to find out, because if this can happen to Michael Dreyer, it could happen to anyone. We tried to track down every living version of Michael Dreyer, but it was like chasing smoke. Every time we got close, he'd disappear. Or rather, they'd disappear. Multiple versions, all running, all hiding, all trying to stay one step ahead of us. And then, one by one, they started dying. The first one was found in Arizona, dead from an apparent overdose. The second was in Florida, drowned in a hotel pool. The third was in Oregon, killed in a car accident. All of them identified as Michael Dreyer. All of them with matching fingerprints and DNA. "They're being hunted," Torres said. "Someone's killing them off." "Or they're killing themselves," I suggested. "Maybe they can't handle the knowledge that there are multiple versions of them. Maybe the psychological stress is too much. Or maybe they're killing each other," Dr. Brennan said. She'd stayed on as a consultant throughout the investigation. "Think about it. If you discovered there were multiple versions of yourself out there, living separate lives, how would you react? Some people might want to eliminate the competition." "That's insane," I said. "Is it? We're dealing with a situation that shouldn't be possible. Who's to say what's rational anymore?" 2 weeks after we'd started tracking the living versions of Michael Dreyer, we were down to 15 confirmed sightings. Then 12, then 9. They were dying faster than we could find them. The 2 we had in custody were becoming increasingly agitated. They both claimed to be having nightmares, vivid dreams of dying in various ways. They both said they could feel the other versions disappearing, like parts of themselves were being erased. "How many of me are left?" the first Dreyer asked me one morning. He looked exhausted, like he hadn't slept in days. "We're not sure. We've confirmed 9 sightings in the last week, but some of them might be duplicates, and we don't know if there are more that we haven't found yet." "I can feel them dying," he said quietly. "Every time one of us dies, I feel it. Like a piece of me is being torn away. How is that possible? I don't know. Am I going to die too? Not if I can help it." But I wasn't sure I believed that. Because whatever was killing the versions of Michael Dreyer, it was systematic and efficient. Someone, or something, was hunting them down. And we couldn't stop it. 3 weeks into the investigation, we were down to 7 confirmed versions. Then 5, then 3, and then, on a cold morning in April, we got the call that changed everything. One of the versions of Michael Dreyer had turned himself in, but this time he had information. Information about where he came from, information about why there were multiple versions of him, and information about who was killing them. The third Michael Dreyer walked into the federal building in Milwaukee at 6:47 a.m. on a Thursday. He was disheveled, wearing clothes that looked like he'd slept in them for days, and he had a wild look in his eyes that immediately put the security guards on alert. But he didn't cause a scene. He just approached the desk and said, "My name is Michael Dreyer, and I need to speak to whoever's in charge of the investigation. I know what's happening to us, and I know how to stop it." They called me immediately. I was on a plane to Milwaukee within 2 hours, Torres with me. By the time we arrived, the third dryer had been processed and was waiting in an interview room, drinking coffee and staring at the wall. When we walked in, he looked up at us with eyes that had seen too much. "You're the ones tracking us," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes," I said, sitting down across from him. "I'm Deputy Marshal Klein. This is Deputy Marshal Torres. You said you have information about what's happening?" "I do, but you're not going to believe me. Try us. At this point, we'll believe anything." He took a long drink of coffee, then set the cup down carefully. "How many of us have you found?" "7, including you and the 2 we have in custody. There were 32 of us, originally, back when it started." "When what started?" "The split, that's what we've been calling it. The moment when Michael Dreyer became Michael Dryers." I leaned forward. "Tell me everything, from the beginning." He nodded slowly. "It happened in 2015. March 17, 2015. The original Michael Dreyer, and I still don't know which one of us that was or if he even exists anymore. He was involved in a medical trial. A pharmaceutical study being conducted by a biotech company called Nexus Labs. They were testing a drug designed to enhance cognitive function, improve memory, increase mental processing speed. Michael volunteered because they were paying $5,000, and he needed the money. What happened during the trial? Something went wrong. The drug didn't just enhance cognitive function. It did something else, something to the fundamental nature of consciousness itself. Michael experienced what he described as a splitting sensation, like his sense of self was being pulled apart. He had vivid hallucinations, out-of-body experiences. And when he woke up, he knew something had changed. Changed how? He started seeing himself, different versions. At first, he thought it was hallucinations, side effects from the drug. But then he started finding evidence. Photos of himself in places he'd never been. Receipts for purchases he didn't remember making. And then, one day, he saw himself walking down the street. A perfect copy, going about a separate life. And this created multiple versions of him? Not created. Split. It's like his consciousness was copied across multiple bodies, each one believing it was the original. We all have the same memories up until that moment in 2015. After that, our experiences diverge. We've lived separate lives, made separate choices, but we're all Michael Dreyer. Torres was taking notes. Why didn't he report this? Why didn't he go back to the lab and tell them what happened? He tried, but when he went back, the lab was gone. Nexus Labs had disappeared. The building was empty, all records erased. It was like they'd never existed. And when Michael tried to find information about them online, about the study, about the drug, everything was scrubbed, no trace. So he ran, I said. We ran, all of us. Because what else could we do? We couldn't explain what had happened. We couldn't prove it. And we were terrified that if the government found out, they'd lock us up, experiment on us. So we ran. We changed our identities, moved to different cities, tried to live separate lives. But you all committed the same crimes, Torres pointed out. Bank fraud, identity theft. Why? Because we're all the same person, the third Dreyer said. We have the same psychology, the same thought patterns, the same moral compass, or lack thereof. We all made similar choices because fundamentally, we're all Michael Dreyer. Some of us were more successful at staying hidden than others. Some of us got caught. And some of you died, I said. His face darkened. Yes, that's the other part. The part I came here to tell you about. Go on. We're not stable. Whatever the drug did to us, it created an unstable system. Think of it like like a quantum state that can't hold. The split consciousness can't be sustained indefinitely. Over time, we're collapsing back into a single state. The versions are dying off, one by one, until eventually there will only be one Michael Dreyer left. A natural process? Torres asked. At first we thought so, but then we realized someone was accelerating it. Someone was hunting us down and killing us systematically. I felt a chill. Who? The original. Or at least the version of Michael Dreyer who believes he's the original. He's decided that there can only be one of us, and he's taking matters into his own hands. He's tracking down every version and eliminating them. How do you know this? Because I've seen him. 3 weeks ago in Denver, he found me at a motel, knocked on my door, and when I opened it, I was looking at myself. But there was something different about him, something cold. He had a gun, and he told me that I wasn't real, that I was just a copy, and that I needed to die so the real Michael Dreyer could exist again. How did you escape? I got lucky. A maid came down the hallway and he got spooked, ran off. But I knew he'd come back, so I ran. I've been running ever since, but I can feel him getting closer. And I can feel the other versions dying. We're running out of time. I sat back in my chair, trying to process what I'd just heard. You're saying one version of Michael Dreyer is hunting down and killing the others? Yes, and he's good at it. He knows how we think, how we run, where we hide. Because he is us, he's always one step ahead. Do you know where he is now? No, but I know where he'll be. Where? Here, eventually. He'll come for the ones you have in custody. He'll come for me. He'll come for all of us. Because he won't stop until there's only one left. Torres and I looked at each other. We need to increase security, she said. Already on it, I replied. I pulled out my phone and called Hendricks, briefing him on the situation. Within an hour, we had armed guards posted outside all 3 interview rooms where the Michael Dryers were being held. We set up perimeter security, checked all access points, did everything we could to make sure no one could get in. But even as we did it, I had a sinking feeling that it wouldn't be enough. Because if what the third Dreyer said was true, we weren't dealing with an ordinary fugitive. We were dealing with someone who knew exactly how we thought, how we operated, what security measures we'd put in place. We were dealing with someone who thought exactly like us, because he was us. That night, I stayed at the Federal Building, sleeping in shifts, keeping watch. Torres did the same. We weren't taking any chances. Around 2 a.m., I was making my rounds checking on each of the prisoners when I noticed something strange. The guard posted outside the third Dryer's room was gone. Not on a break, not using the bathroom, just gone. The chair was empty, the hallway deserted. I drew my weapon and approached the door carefully. It was slightly ajar. I pushed it open and looked inside. The third Dreyer was sitting at the table, just as I'd left him. But there was someone else in the room, standing in the corner. Another Michael Dreyer. "Hello, Deputy Klein," the figure in the corner said. "I've been waiting for you." I trained my weapon on him. Step away from him, hands where I can see them. "Relax," he said, raising his hands slowly. "I'm not here to hurt anyone. Well, not you, anyway. Who are you?" "I'm Michael Dreyer, the real one, and I'm here to correct a mistake." The third Dreyer stood up, backing away from the figure in the corner. "That's him. That's the one who's been killing us." "Killing you?" The figure laughed. "I'm not killing anyone. I'm restoring balance, fixing what was broken. There can only be one Michael Dreyer, one consciousness, one identity. The rest are errors, glitches in the system. They need to be eliminated." "You are an error," the third Dreyer said. "We all are. None of us is more real than the others." "Wrong. I am the prime version." The one who maintained the most stable consciousness throughout the split. The one who has the clearest memories. The strongest sense of self. I am Michael Dreyer. You're just copies. I kept my weapon trained on him. Put your hands behind your head and get on the ground, now. I can't do that, Deputy. I have work to finish. He moved, fast. Faster than I expected. He lunged for the third dryer, and I fired. The shot caught him in the shoulder, spinning him around, but it didn't stop him. He kept moving, grabbed the third dryer by the throat, and squeezed. I fired again. This time, the bullet hit him center mass, and he went down. The third dryer gasped for air, stumbling back against the wall. Security flooded into the room, weapons drawn, voices shouting. We secured the shooter, called for medical, locked down the entire building. But even as the paramedics worked on him, trying to stop the bleeding, I could see he was dying. "How did you get in?" I asked him. He smiled through bloody teeth. "I know every entrance, every security protocol, every shift change. I know because you know. Because we're all the same. How many others are there?" Torres demanded. "How many versions of Michael Dreyer are left?" "Not enough," he said. His voice was fading. "I almost had them all. Just a few more. Just a few more, and I would have been whole again." "You're insane," the third dryer said. "No, I'm the only one who understood what needed to happen. The split can't be sustained. We're all dying anyway, slowly, painfully. I was just speeding up the inevitable, merging us back into one." "That's not how it works," the third dryer said. "Killing us doesn't make you more whole, it just makes you a murderer." The shooter's eyes were glazing over. "You'll see. When there's only one left, you'll see that I was right." He died 3 minutes later. The paramedics tried everything, but there was too much damage. We stood there in silence, staring at another body with Michael Dreyer's face. 4 left, the third dryer said quietly, including me and the 2 downstairs. 4 versions left out of 32. "How long do we have?" Torres asked. "Before the instability catches up with you?" "I don't know. Could be days. Could be years. But we're all dying one way or another. The split is collapsing. And eventually, there will only be one of us left. If any of us survive at all." We spent the rest of the night processing the scene, documenting everything, trying to make sense of what had happened. The security guard who'd been posted outside the door was found unconscious in a storage closet, knocked out with a precise blow to the head. The shooter had used a stolen access card to enter the building, had moved through the security system like he'd designed it himself. Because in a way, he had. He knew everything we knew. He thought the way we thought. He was us, investigating ourselves. The next morning, Hendricks called me into his office. He looked exhausted, older than I'd ever seen him. "I've been on the phone with Washington all night," he said. "They want answers. They want to know how this happened, what we're going to do about it, how we prevent it from happening again." "What did you tell them?" "The truth, that we don't know, that we're dealing with something unprecedented, something that shouldn't be possible, and that we have 3 versions of the same person in custody, all of them dying, and we can't save any of them." "What do they want us to do?" "Find the others, the remaining versions. Bring them in before they die or before they kill each other. And then..." He paused, "and then we figure out what the hell to do with them." Over the next 2 weeks, we found 3 more versions of Michael Dreyer. 1 in Montana, 1 in Texas, 1 in Maine. We brought them all in, processed them, housed them in separate facilities. They were all terrified, all dying, all feeling the collapse accelerating. "I can feel myself disappearing," one of them told me. "Like I'm being erased, piece by piece. My memories are starting to blur, to merge with the others. Sometimes I'm not sure which experiences are mine and which belong to a different version. How long? I asked. Days? Maybe less. We're all converging toward the same point, and when we get there, either we'll all die or one of us will remain. Which one? I don't know. Maybe the strongest, maybe the luckiest, or maybe none of us. Maybe the original Michael Dreyer died in 2015, and we're all just echoes, fading away. I didn't know what to say to that. On the 15th day after we'd shot the Hunter version of Michael Dreyer, we were down to 5 confirmed living versions. The 3 we had in custody in Chicago, 1 in Montana, 1 in Texas. The one in Maine had died the day before, apparent heart failure. The autopsy showed nothing unusual. He'd just stopped. It's happening faster now, Dr. Brennan told us. The collapse is accelerating. My estimate is that within a week, maybe less, there will only be 1 or 2 versions left. Possibly none. Can we stop it? Torres asked. I don't know. I don't even know what it is. Some kind of quantum decoherence of consciousness? A breakdown of whatever process allowed one consciousness to exist in multiple bodies? We're in uncharted territory here. That night, I was reviewing files in my office when I got a call from the facility in Montana. The Michael Dreyer they were holding had vanished. Not escaped, vanished. The guards had checked on him at 11 p.m. and he was there. They checked again at 11:15, and he was gone. The cell was locked from the outside. There was no way he could have gotten out. But he was gone. 2 hours later, we got a similar call from Texas. The version there had also disappeared. Same circumstances. Locked cell, no way out. Just gone. They're not escaping, Dr. Brennan said when I told her. They're ceasing to exist. The collapse is complete. They're being absorbed back into whatever's left. We rushed to check on the 3 versions we had in Chicago. We found them in their cells, but they'd changed. They were no longer individuals. They were all exhibiting the same behaviors simultaneously, standing in the same position, making the same gestures, speaking the same words at exactly the same time. We're merging, they said in perfect unison. All of us. The split is reversing. Soon there will be only one. Which one? I asked. We don't know. Maybe all of us. Maybe none of us. We can feel the others, the ones who've died, the ones who've disappeared. They're still here somehow. Part of us. And we're all becoming the same thing. What thing? They looked at me with Michael Dreyer's face, but the eyes were different now, distant, uncertain. Michael Dreyer, the original, restored. Or maybe something new, a synthesis of all the versions, all the experiences, all the memories. We don't know what will be when this is over, if will be anything at all. Over the next 72 hours, we watched as the 3 remaining versions slowly merged. They stopped being separate individuals and became echoes of the same person, moving in sync, speaking in unison, sharing thoughts instantaneously. And then, at 3:47 a.m. on a Monday morning, 2 of them simply vanished. No sound, no flash of light, no indication that anything had happened. The guards checked the cells, and 2 of them were empty. Just gone. Erased from existence. Only one Michael Dreyer remained. We moved him to a secure observation room and watched him carefully. He sat on a cot, staring at his hands, looking confused and scared. Dr. Brennan went in to talk to him. "How do you feel?" she asked. "I don't know," he said. His voice was uncertain, shaky. "I remember everything. All of them, all the versions, their lives, their deaths, everything. It's all in my head now. 32 lifetimes, 32 sets of memories, and I don't know which ones are mine. Do you remember the split? Do you remember the drug trial? Yes. No. Maybe. I have memories of it, but I also have memories of things that happened after, things that different versions experienced. I don't know what's real anymore. What do you remember about the trial, about Nexus Labs? His face went pale. They knew. The people running the study, they knew what would happen. They'd done it before with other subjects. The split isn't a side effect, it's the intended outcome. Why? Why would anyone want to create multiple versions of the same person? Because consciousness is the final frontier. If you can copy it, split it, transfer it between bodies, you can achieve immortality. You can exist in multiple places at once. You can become more than human. He looked up at Dr. Brennan with haunted eyes. But we're proof that it doesn't work. The system can't sustain itself. Eventually, it collapses. Everything converges back to a single point. Are you that point? Are you the original Michael Dreyer? I don't know. I might be. Or I might be a synthesis of all the versions. Or I might just be the last one standing. I don't know who I am anymore. We kept him under observation for another week. During that time, his condition stabilized. He stopped experiencing the merging sensation, stopped feeling the other versions. He became, for all intents and purposes, a single individual again. But he carried the memories of 32 lifetimes. 32 versions of himself, all collapsed back into one mind, and it was driving him mad. I can't sleep, he told me during one of our interviews. Every time I close my eyes, I see all the deaths, all the versions of me dying over and over. I remember drowning, burning, falling, being shot. I remember all of it, and I don't know which death is waiting for me. You're safe here, I said. We're going to protect you. From who? From what? I'm the last one. There's no one left to hunt me. But that doesn't mean I'm safe. The instability is still there. I can feel it. I'm falling apart from the inside. Dr. Brennan thinks you've stabilized. Dr. Brennan is wrong. I'm not stable. I'm just temporarily coherent. But I can feel it starting to slip again. The sense of self. The boundaries between the different versions. They're blurring. And soon I won't know who I am at all. He was right. Over the next month, his condition deteriorated. He started experiencing dissociative episodes, moments where he'd slip between different versions' memories, unable to distinguish which experiences were his. He'd call himself by different names, reference events that hadn't happened to him specifically but had happened to other versions. And then, one morning, we found him unresponsive in his cell. He'd suffered what the doctors called a catastrophic neurological event. His brain had essentially overloaded, unable to process the conflicting memories and identities. He died 3 days later without regaining consciousness. The last Michael Dreyer was gone. I never filed a final report on the Michael Dreyer case. I started it a dozen times, but I could never find the right words. How do you explain in an official document that one person became 32 people and then collapsed back into zero? How do you document something that shouldn't be possible? The official record shows that Michael Dreyer was arrested in March 2020 in Kansas City, convicted of bank fraud, and sentenced to 8 years at FCI Englewood. He served 3 years of his sentence before being transferred to Chicago for additional questioning related to ongoing fraud investigations. He died in federal custody in April 2023 due to complications from a pre-existing neurological condition. That's the official story. Clean, simple, explainable. But it's not the truth. The truth is that Michael Dreyer split into multiple versions of himself in 2015 as a result of an experimental drug trial conducted by a biotech company that vanished without a trace. The truth is that these versions lived separate lives, committed separate crimes, and eventually started dying off as the split consciousness collapsed. The truth is that one version tried to hunt down and kill the others, and we shot him. The truth is that the last remaining version died in our custody, his mind unable to handle the memories of 32 lifetimes. But no one wants to hear that truth, because it opens up questions that we don't have answers to. Questions about consciousness, identity, the nature of reality itself. Questions that make people uncomfortable. So the official story stands, and the truth gets buried in a classified file that maybe 3 people in the entire federal government have clearance to read. Torres left the Marshals Service 6 months after Michael Dreyer died. She said she needed a change, needed to work cases that made sense. I understood. She'd seen things during the investigation that had shaken her faith in what was possible, what was real. Sometimes I think about calling her, asking if she ever thinks about the case. But I never do. Some things are better left alone. Dr. Brennan published a paper on dissociative identity disorder that referenced an unusual case she'd consulted on, but she was careful not to include any identifying details. I read it once. She came close to describing what really happened, but she wrapped it in enough psychological terminology and theoretical frameworks that no one would ever connect it to Michael Dreyer. I think she knows more than she's saying. I think she has theories about what happened that she's keeping to herself. Maybe someday she'll share them. Maybe not. Hendricks retired last year. He's 70 now, living in Florida, enjoying his pension. I visited him once, and over beers on his back porch, we talked about old cases. At one point, I brought up Michael Dreyer. Hendricks got quiet for a long time, then said, "You know what keeps me up at night? The question of which one was real. Were they all real? Was none of them real? Or was there one original and the rest were just copies? Because if they were all equally real, all equally Michael Dreyer, then we basically watched a man die 32 times. And I don't know how to live with that." I didn't have an answer for him. I still don't. I kept every piece of evidence from the case. It's all in a storage unit under a false name, filed away in boxes that no one will ever look through. Photos, interview transcripts, forensic reports, psychological evaluations, everything that proves what really happened. I tell myself I'm keeping it for posterity, in case someone someday needs to know the truth. But really, I think I'm keeping it because I need proof that it was real, that I didn't imagine the whole thing. Sometimes, late at night, I pull out the photos and look at them. Dozens of photos of Michael Dreyer. Different locations, different clothes, different expressions, but always the same face, always the same eyes, and I wonder, which one was he? Which one was the real Michael Dreyer? I've had dreams about him, all of them. All 32 versions, standing in a room together, looking at me. And in the dreams, I ask them which one is real. They all answer at the same time. We all are, and none of us are. I wake up from those dreams feeling unsettled, feeling like I've missed something important, some crucial detail that would make sense of everything. But I can never figure out what it is. 6 months ago, I got a call from a detective in Seattle. They'd found a body in a hotel room, apparent suicide. The victim's ID said his name was Michael Dreyer. Fingerprints matched our database. "I thought this guy died last year," the detective said. "In Chicago, in federal custody." "He did," I said. "Then who's this?" "I don't know. I flew to Seattle and examined the body myself. It was him. Same face, same scar, same fingerprints. Another Michael Dreyer, appearing after the last one had died. Impossibly, inexplicably. I didn't file a report on that one either. I just had the body cremated quietly, the ashes scattered, The case closed as suicide. Because I knew if I reported it, if I opened up that door again, we'd be right back where we started. Chasing versions of a man who shouldn't exist, trying to make sense of something that has no sense to be made. And because I'm afraid. Afraid that he's still out there. That Michael Dreyer is still splitting, still multiplying, still existing in forms we can't track or understand. Afraid that we didn't solve the case at all. We just postponed it. I think about the drug trial sometimes, about Nexus Labs. We tried to find them, to track down whoever was responsible, but it was like chasing ghosts. Every lead evaporated, every witness couldn't be found, every document had been destroyed. It was a perfect cover-up, executed with precision and resources that suggested involvement at the highest levels, which means they might still be out there, still running trials, still experimenting with consciousness, with identity, with the fundamental nature of self, still creating more people like Michael Dreyer, more splits, more collapses, more impossibilities, and if they are, then this could happen again, to someone else, to anyone. I've tried to warn people. I've written memos, sent emails to supervisors, requested investigations into pharmaceutical trials and biotech companies, but no one wants to hear it. The official position is that Michael Dreyer was a singular case, an anomaly, a glitch in the system that has been resolved. Case closed. Move on. So I move on. I work other cases, track other fugitives, serve other warrants. I do my job. But I'm always watching, always looking for signs that it's happening again. Multiple sightings of the same person in different places. Fingerprint matches that shouldn't exist. Deaths that multiply when there should only be one. And sometimes I see him, Michael Dreyer, walking down the street, sitting in a coffee shop, standing at a crosswalk. Just for a moment, just long enough for me to question what I saw. And then he's gone. I tell myself it's just my imagination, that I'm seeing his face in every stranger because I spent so long looking at his photos, interviewing his versions, trying to understand who he was. I tell myself it's a psychological phenomenon, a form of pareidolia where my brain is pattern matching and finding his features where they don't exist. But sometimes I'm not sure. Sometimes I wonder if there are more of him out there, more versions that we never found, more splits that happened after we stopped looking, more Michael Dryers living quiet lives, unaware that they're not singular, not unique, not real in the way they think they are. And I wonder, if it happened to him, could it happen to me? Could I wake up one day and discover there are other versions of me living separate lives? Could I split, fracture, multiply? Could I find myself face to face with another Robert Klein, both of us insisting we're the original? I don't know. And that's what terrifies me. Because the Michael Dreyer case taught me that reality is not as solid as we think, that identity is not as fixed as we believe, that the boundaries between self and other, between one and many, between existence and non-existence, those boundaries are thinner than we realize, and sometimes they break. I keep the photograph on my desk, the last photo taken of Michael Dreyer before he died. He's looking at the camera with tired eyes, and there's something in his expression that haunts me. It's not fear, exactly. It's more like resignation. Like he understood, at the end, that he was never going to figure out who he really was. That the question of identity, of self, of which one am I, that question had no answer. Or maybe it had too many answers. 32 answers. And all of them true. And all of them false. Last week, I got another call. This time from Portland. Another body with Michael Dreyer's fingerprints. Another impossible death of a man who's already dead. I didn't fly out to examine it. I didn't file a report. I just made a note in my private files and moved on. Because I know now that this case will never end. Michael Dreyer will keep appearing, keep dying, keep splitting into new versions that shouldn't exist. Maybe it's a curse. Maybe it's the inevitable result of what was done to him in that drug trial. Maybe it's something else entirely, something we don't have words for yet. But I know this. Michael Dreyer is out there. Still running. Still hiding. Still being hunted by himself, or by others, or by the universe itself. Trying to collapse him back into coherence. And someday, one of those versions is going to walk into a federal building, approach a security desk and say, "My name is Michael Dreyer, and I'm turning myself in." And we'll start the whole thing over again. Because that's the nature of the case. It never ends. It just repeats, fractals, multiplies. One becomes many. Many become one. One becomes many again. Forever. I close my eyes, and I see all 32 versions of Michael Dreyer standing in a room, looking at me with the same tired eyes. And they all ask the same question at the same time. Which one of us is real? And I still don't have an answer. I don't think I ever will. The file stays open on my desk. Officially closed, officially resolved. But in my mind, in my dreams, in the quiet moments when I'm alone with my thoughts, it's still open, still unresolved, still haunting me with questions that have no answers. Michael Dreyer turned himself in, twice, and then 30 more times. And each time we thought we'd caught him. Each time we thought the case was closed. Each time we were wrong. Because you can't catch someone who's everywhere and nowhere. You can't arrest someone who's everyone and no one. You can't close a case that never started and never ends. Michael Dreyer is still out there. All of him. None of him. One of him. 32 of him. And he always will be. That's the truth. The real truth. The truth that will never make it into any official report. And that's the truth that keeps me awake at night.